while it does have its advantages, there are still issues in place that aircraft producers have yet to figure out.
SAFs are different from Jet A due to lack of aromatics, so sealing could be a problem. So they need to make sure that all the pumps, valves, the sealing are okay. Also, SAFs can differ from Jet A in density, right? Slightly. Even that, it will affect the range of the aircraft, right? For example, the aircraft initially flies 2,000 miles, but with this different fuel, which the density is slightly different, the energy content is slightly different, all those will change. So the aircraft framer needs to figure that out. Because of density change, it can also affect the center of gravity, like distribution of fuel around the aircraft. So those are the things we need to consider when we change to a different fuel. But again, I don't see major obstacles in implementing those fuels in the aircraft.
There is one other major stumbling block: the ability to produce SAF in meaningful quantities.
Currently, SAF production accounts for maybe less than 1% of the overall jet fuels. So that basically means we're nowhere close to, even a few percentage that can be blended with Jet A to power our fleet. So it really means that we are not at scale for aviation applications.
Critics argue that even optimistic SAF projections fall well short of replacing fossil jet fuel at scale, and improvements in efficiency on their own won't keep pace with how fast the aviation industry is growing. On the other hand, as research and technology progress, SAF at scale becomes more viable, for example by using biomass that does not occupy huge areas of land or compete with food production, like human waste and algae. So, although this is a way off and something that's not going to happen overnight, there are alternative supplies of fuel that can power our airlines and potentially one day mitigate oil shortages. So now we return to our question. Are countries really running out of jet fuel? Aviation is critical to the global economy. We need fuel to power our constantly expanding fleets. So are we exaggerating the problem of the threat to our jet fuel supplies? Well, yes, in the sense that this isn't a problem of the physical reserves of the raw material to produce kerosene, but rather a serious long-term issue around interrupted distribution. What's more, there is also the pressing problem of reducing harmful emissions. The experts seem unanimous. With an increasingly fragmented and frequently disrupted supply chain, it could be beneficial to all if there was more self-reliance and diversification in the jet fuel market. You've been listening to The Inquiry from the BBC World Service. Before we jet off, I want to tell you that The Inquiry has a huge archive of episodes available to listen to. This includes Should We Mine the Moon? And Why Are Our Taps Running Dry? You can find these and more wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for The Inquiry, and while you're there, please press subscribe and turn on push notifications so you never miss an episode. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Rajan Datar. The producer was Matt Toulson. The researcher, Evie Yabsley. The editor, Tom Bigwood. And the technical producer was Mitch Goodall.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio, and we are live downtown in our CBC Studio 15. Thanks so much for being here. We're on air with your morning show until 8:37 a.m., and today's going to be good. 22 degrees is our daytime high in Winnipeg. And, hang on. 23 degrees is our daytime high. Even better. Lots of sunshine. The fog, if you're having it somewhere in Manitoba this morning, should dissipate a little bit later. It is also going to be nice in Brandon. Your high today is 27 in the sun. Bring out the shorts for sure. And then up in Thompson, sunny and 16 degrees. Right now, I am regretting wearing a sweater. All right, let's say good morning to everybody. There's Abby Adiyemi behind the controls. Abby is our senior tech on the show, and we'll be on the air covering weather. Corey Funk decided to come back to the team, and we welcome him this morning. Corey directs the show. He's been busy with other assignments, and he will be on air covering the commute. And there's Mr. Darren Marash, who's a producer of our YouTube stream. Make sure you say hello there. And we'll have to make sure we get a direct email to Darren, because you've all been sending out photos of the sky and your life in Manitoba. Yesterday was Manitoba Day. So if you want those visuals up, Darren's your man. And you'll know that if you're watching the show streaming. So good morning to our online viewers. All right, let's go to the news center. It is 2 minutes to 6 o'clock. Heather Wells is in with what's making news in the province today. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, 5 workers at Winnipeg's largest private health clinic are set to walk out from the job next Tuesday. Cardiology techs at the Manitoba Clinic issued strike notice yesterday. Their union, the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals, says Well Health has proposed wages on average 27% lower than the public sector. The Union for Manitoba Teachers hopes it can forge a good relationship with the province's new Commissioner of Teacher Professional Misconduct. The government named veteran child safety advocate Noni Clausen to that post. The Teachers Society president, Lillian Clausen, says the union wants to partner with the commissioner and is open to systemic changes in the way teachers are investigated. We'll hear the latest coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
Well, yesterday, as Heather was reporting, the Order of Manitoba was announced. 12 Manitobans will receive the province's highest honor. And on the news, you heard that Tracy Dahl is one of them. And she's going to be joining us actually live after 6 to talk about what this means to her. Plus, we continue our series on youth unemployment today. Stay tuned for that.
On cue. Before CSI, before Bones, there was no such thing as like a forensic anthropologist lab coat TV hero. Kathy Reichs changed all that. She's the real-life scientist who wrote 24 best-selling novels and basically created a genre.
We were just nerds working in our labs for years and nobody paid any attention to us.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. U.S. President Donald Trump is due to land in Beijing later this hour. He's beginning a state visit to China, where he's expected to be received in grand style. An earlier trip was postponed because of the Iran war. That issue is likely to be high on the agenda as the two leaders meet, but it's just one of many. The CBC's Willie Lowry is in our Washington bureau. Willie, what are some of the key outcomes Trump will be looking for at this summit?
Martina, China is unquestionably America's biggest rival on the international stage, and relations have been tense. This visit is part of a reset by the Trump administration. President Donald Trump has spoken glowingly of his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping.
He's been a friend of mine. He's been somebody that we get along with, and I think you're going to see that good things are going to happen. This is going to be a very exciting trip. A lot of good things are going to happen.
Trump's mission over the coming days has been scaled back somewhat because of the Iran war, which is likely to be a major talking point between the two leaders. But Trump will try to focus on trade and technology. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has really spearheaded this trip instead of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as is normally customary, a reflection of how economically oriented this trip is likely to be. Trump says he will raise the issue of Jimmy Lai. He's that pro-democracy media tycoon currently serving a 20-year sentence under Hong Kong's tough security laws.
Okay, so that covers the U.S. side of things. What about China? What does she want to get out of this?
So Xi is expected to press the U.S. on Taiwan. Washington currently does not support independence, but Xi is hoping to get the Trump administration to say it opposes it. On technology, Beijing is hoping to get the U.S. to ease restrictions around the sale of AI chips and semiconductors, which it needs to drive its economic, military, and technological ambitions.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. Thanks, Willie.
My pleasure.
BC's Supreme Court will deliver its verdict today in the trial of a former RCMP officer accused of colluding with China. William Miker is accused of taking part in a global Chinese plan to bully wanted expats into returning home. As Georgie Smythe reports, Miker maintains he's innocent.
Really don't want to comment too much while things are still underway, but I'm anxious to get home to my family.
William Miker pleaded not guilty to one count of engaging in preparatory acts to commit an offence under Canada's Security of Information Act. The former RCMP officer, who once specialised in financial crimes, denies allegations he was working for the Chinese government to prepare a campaign of intimidation against a multimillionaire Chinese expat who lives in BC. A man China says fled the country with hundreds of millions of dollars. To prove their case, Crown prosecutors used an email Miker sent to a colleague in 2017, where he talked about a, quote, fraudster wanted by Chinese police. Crown lawyers argued it was clear Miker was referring to a Chinese national in BC and were expected to call a key witness to prove that argument. But instead, they shocked the courtroom in closing their case without him. The prosecution says it's presented a range of facts that Miker was laying the groundwork for a campaign of extortion, one that was an affront to Canadian sovereignty.
I think I'm a pretty straight, honest guy.
On the final day of the judge-only trial, Miker's counsel told the court the Crown's case is purely circumstantial, based mostly on a narrow reading of 2 paragraphs from that email, and that criminal intent had not been proven. A verdict is expected today. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
CNN is reporting the Central Intelligence Agency is carrying out operations against cartel members in Mexico. It says since last year, CIA operatives have been involved in everything from intelligence sharing to assassination operations inside Mexico's borders. A CIA spokesperson calls the reporting false and salacious and says it puts American lives at risk. The Mexican government is also denying the reports. Sea-Watch says the Libyan Coast Guard has opened fire on members of its aid organization. It says shots were fired when humanitarian workers were rescuing people from an overcrowded boat in the Mediterranean Sea. As Megan Williams tells us, the NGO says this is part of a growing pattern of violence by Libyan maritime forces, and it's funded by Europe.
The Sea-Watch 5 had just rescued about 90 people from a sinking boat in international waters north of Libya on Monday. Sea-Watch says Libyan patrol boats then began pursuing the ship with the rescued people and about 30 crew members on board.
They wanted to abduct a vessel and demanded that we follow them to Libya.
Sea-Watch spokesperson Julia Messner says the crew sent 2 Mayday calls that were ignored by the Central Maritime Coordination Office in Rome. Messner says Libyan boats are tied to militias that intercept migrants at sea and return them to abuse on land.
They are actively bringing people into a cycle of violence where people have to pay ransoms, family are called while their loved ones are tortured and are threatened to pay ransoms. Then when these ransoms are paid, put people on a boat, and then again at sea they intercept them to bring them back.
Human rights groups have been documenting abuse, extortion, and torture in Libya for years. But European governments continue to fund, train, and equip Libyan maritime forces as part of their effort to stop migrant boats from reaching Europe. The EU says its training has helped reduce violent incidents at sea. Sea-Watch and other rescue groups dispute that. They say Europe is outsourcing border control to armed groups that put both migrants and rescuers in danger. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
Keir Starmer is still clinging to his job as British Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party, but he has a lot of work to do to shore up support. In Parliament, King Charles has just delivered a speech laying out the government's priorities. It's not clear if that will be enough to satisfy critics who want a transformed agenda. Earlier this morning, Starmer had a brief meeting with his health minister, Wes Streeting, a rumoured leadership challenger. Australia's government is trying to make it easier for young people to buy a home. Real estate there is among the most expensive in the world, so the government is scaling back tax breaks for property investors. Australia's treasurer, Jim Chalmers, says that could help 75,000 primarily younger people enter the housing market.
The status quo is busted in the housing market and in the tax system, and where those two things intersect creates a level of intergenerational inequity that we're not prepared to tolerate.
The move is controversial. Just before last year's election, the Labor government had promised not to make changes to its tax policy for investors. But electoral power in Australia is shifting to younger generations. One of the largest coffee chains in the United States is coming back to Canada. There are plans for hundreds of Dunkin Donuts locations to open in this country in the coming years. But as business reporter Anis Hidari reports, the brand has struggled in Canada before.
I absolutely cannot wait.
Flight attendant Jay Antflick loves Dunkin Donuts iced coffee. He buys it whenever he flies to the U.S.
Usually 2 to 3 a day.
2 to 3
so
a
this
day?
Is gonna be, oh, yeah. That's how I run on coffee.
He won't have to run far by the end of the year. Foodtastic, the Montreal company behind Second Cup, says it's bringing Dunkin Donuts to Canada.
And all our franchisees are going to be local Canadian franchisees.
Peter Mammis is the president of Foodtastic. He says he sees opportunity even in a softer economy.
The quick service restaurants are having a little bit of a lull, but I think that's actually a benefit to us bringing Dunkin in now because there's going to be a lot more real estate available to us.
In the 2010s, the last few Dunkin franchises in Canada folded under other ownership, in part blaming a lack of investment to fight Tim Hortons. University of Toronto marketing professor David Soberman says Tim's is still a big competitor.
And they have somewhere around 4,000 outlets, so even if Dunkin opens a couple of hundred outlets, it's still very small compared to Tim Hortons.
Is there room for more brands to enter into the Canadian market? I think so.
Robert Carter is with the Coffee Association of Canada. Its members include both Tim Hortons and the new operators of Dunkin.
Canadians are amongst the highest in terms of coffee consumption. It's not surprising that brands such as, Dunkin's are looking at Canada as that natural extension.
The first outlets are planned for Toronto and Montreal, so while the slogan says America runs on Dunkin', most of Canada will have to wait. Anis Hidari, CBC News, Calgary.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, go to cbcnews.ca. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Well, good morning, Winnipeg, and hello, Manitoba. I switched it there. See what I did? And it really is a good morning. We've got beautiful weather on the way. Welcome to Wednesday, May 13th. I'm Marcy Marcusa. And you are waking up with CBC. This is the morning show, Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and YouTube. It is the day after Manitoba Day. Yesterday, we learned the names of 12 Manitobans who are extraordinary. They will receive the Order of Manitoba for their work in their various fields. One of them is the beautiful Tracy Dahl, both beautiful in voice and beautiful in what she's given back to the community over many years of her career here. We're going to talk to her coming up in a moment. Also this hour on the show, does Canada need its own AI infrastructure? Should telecommunications giants have a hand in running it? We're going to look at that from a national perspective. We're going to also hear a local headline in a moment from Heather. And then a little bit later, U.S. President Donald Trump does arrive in China today. That Top World Report will have a rundown of the visit. Here's Heather, though, with local news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a family wants answers after a disabled man living in a group home died malnourished in hospital. 54-year-old Sean Felstead weighed only 92 pounds when he died in 2024. He died a month after his sister saw him at the Gimli group home. Shelley Schultz says his appearance was an absolute shock. His family now is calling for an inquest. A woman in Ile-des-Chênes has started a grassroots backlash against a potential AI data center in her community. Jet AI and Consensus Core propose building a center across the road from Christy Little's home. Little started an online petition which now has more than 10,000 signatures. She worries about potential light, noise, and air pollution. I'll be back with more news from Manitoba coming up at 6:30.
Yesterday, I just sat in the yard, Heather.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I don't have, that's the end of the sentence.
That's great. I love it. It was a beautiful day. It was lovely.
And I was just watching the birds coming and going and looking at the buds pop out. And yeah, it was lovely.
Finally. It feels like we're just getting there now.
I know. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
It's going to be better today. Heather and I are teeing up a great forecast from Abby. Here it is.
Yes, Marcy, we're starting day already with clear skies. Most of the regions are going to be seeing this really beautiful start, a significant warm up across the south. Well, up north, we're also seeing those clearing trend there. For Winnipeg right now, the sun already made its appearance about 25 minutes ago. We're looking out for a bright, mainly clear day that is expected to hold throughout. We're seeing current conditions already 7 degrees at the Forks, and we're tracking 2 at the airport. Sunny skies, both regions. Morning temperatures kind of feeling cool under this mild southern winds. But for the city, we're expecting a beautiful high of 23. Remember, Marcy, yesterday I said 17 and maybe 18, and I checked, and around 6 yesterday, we crossed over to like 18 degrees, and I'm like, okay, so
we got there.
Yeah, so today I see a high of 23, and if the sun holds again, we might creep up to maybe 24. But the high for today stays at 23 degrees, and tonight is going to stay pretty clear. Across the southern region, starting around 4 degrees, also some fog patches dissipating, making room for sunshine. So there's lots of sunshine across board today. Winnipeg, we're getting to 23. Right now it's 7 degrees at the Forks.
All right. Thanks, Abby Adeyemi.
Thank you.
It is time for the morning commute, and a little bit of soccer news before we do that, because it's soccer weather. And on our small and mighty team, we have Darren Marash's daughter, who's playing really well and won, and is going to be playing with a big team today. So good luck. Woohoo. And then on the other end of the spectrum, she's a teenager, but your kid had his first soccer game last night.
Yeah, first soccer game yesterday.
How old?
3.
Right. So he's a Timbit?
He's a Timbit, and he kicked the ball, and that's all we can really ask for. So it was very cute.
I heard your parents were comparing him to you.
Yes, so I was the kid who was picking flowers on the side. He actually, he's already ahead of where I was at this point. He was chasing the ball. He touched the ball a couple times with his feet. He's on his way to being a pro.
They're so cute. That's my favorite thing, too, about nice weather days, is hearing all the kids and just different teams in the neighborhood, right?
Seeing them all sit around eating cherries together and just having a good time. It's like what you dream of during the winter, and here we are.
Here we are. We're getting there. Yeah. All right, so today the commute itself?
Yeah, quiet commute overall. Haven't heard of any major issues yet out there. Seems pretty quiet, but if there's construction getting in your way, anything new you want to let me know about, I can look into it for you. That number to call, 204-788-3093.
We are listening to the beautiful voice of Tracy Dahl, a coloratura soprano who's performed in opera houses and on concert stages all around the world. She is one of the 12 Manitobans who will receive the province's highest honor, the Order of Manitoba. It was just announced yesterday, but she's not new to winning awards, including the Order of Canada in 2018. In Manitoba, though, she also gives back to our community when she's off stage, especially through CIBC Run for the Cure. Tracy Dahl is a breast cancer survivor, and she's raised to date more than $60,000 for the Canadian Cancer Society. She teaches over at Desautels Faculty of Music at the University of Manitoba, and I'm pleased to say she's up early and with us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Barcy.
So it's interesting because you've received the Order of Canada. You will now receive the Order of Manitoba. Where you live and have given back and have performed over years, and people, feel like they know you and do know you.
Mm-hmm.
How does this feel then, the Order of Manitoba?
More personal, because it's from home. It's from it's where you were born. It's where you live. I chose to live here throughout my whole career, so it feels very, very, very special for sure.
Yeah. When it comes to, what you've given the world and what you've given Manitoba with opera and now teaching, the future, do you share with your students your own personal journey? Like, when did you fall in love with opera?
Oh, gosh. it was a very strange occurrence. And for those who know the kind of trajectory of my career, it was pretty odd. I actually started at the Royal MTC Center. So I was doing side by Sondheim at the Warehouse Theatre and simultaneously doing a little tiny part over at Manitoba Opera, doing Barbarina. And it was very early days for Manitoba Opera. I think maybe they were 10 years old or something like that at the time. And they sent out a call to all the music teachers in the city saying, we're looking for some singers for these small parts. And so I went and auditioned, but I was a theater girl. I was destined to Broadway, so I thought. And it was very close, just a different opera house, just different house, different theater. And that was the beginning of it, was singing this little tiny role, Barbarina. And just this year, Grace Budolowski, who has been studying with me for the last 2 years, she sang that part. And I think Andriana Churchman has sung that part. So it's one of those introductory roles that you can get your way in. And I don't know if I can do this, but boy, I love it.
Yeah.
And it was such a team sport, if you will. I loved it in every way, and that I was hooked. And then I went back to the Banff School of Fine Arts to study again, and I had to kind of learn very quickly because the railroad tracks switched very quickly for me between the two types of theater.
Mm-hmm. And the type of theater that you went to opera also includes things that musical theater typically don't. So now you're dealing with, different composers, styles, and language.
Yes.
Yeah. What was that like for you? And how many languages do you feel you have under your belt that at least you can sing in now, do you think?
Well, I think I could probably sing in any of them. Like ones that I haven't done, I could, if I got what's called the International Phonetic Alphabet. There are ways to learn other languages, but the ones that are kind of traditionally done, Italian, French, and German, and English, of course, Spanish, those are the languages I sing in the most. But I had to do a lot of catching up because it wasn't what I wanted to do. I hadn't gone to school to study this. It wasn't what I thought I was going to end up doing.
Yeah, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yeah, well, it's like, other people dream of being opera singers. I hadn't grown up with listening to Saturday Afternoon at the Opera, like some families did with their kids. And so it was a big learning curve. And I remember my sister was getting married the summer I had made this big choice to change. And I was going to go into opera, and we were listening to something on CBC TV, and it was a Wagner ring cycle. And she said, "Really? That's what you're going to do?"
Your career, of course, has been filled with numerous notable awards that Manitoba has celebrated as well, because we always feel like, yay, a Manitoban. But you debuted at the Metropolitan Opera in New York. Obviously, San Francisco on opening night of Lucia, and then working at the university, just when you look at your career later, moving to teaching. But I want to take us off stage here because I do want to focus on the Order of Manitoba. You started by saying it's personal. There's nothing more personal than giving back after you've had a health scare. Tell me about raising money for the Canadian Cancer Society.
That began, I had finished my treatment in the summer of 2011, and my sister noticed that there was a breast cancer event, I think what we would have called it. There's something going on, and maybe we should go and see what that is. And that's where I met a lot of people that I got connected there. And it was through the running room first. The running room had a clinic for those who had breast cancer who wanted to start to run, to get back into shape and get their bodies going. And that was the beginning of it. And so the first year we just walked through that event and was kind of overwhelmed, that's an understatement, by all the people who were there. The Run for the Cure every year is just, last year was a horrendous day. the tents blew away. It was like they just started an event because the weather, I've never seen it so bad. But we've run in snow, we've run in rain. We have on our team, we've had someone in there who was 90 and we had babies. Like our team is made up of family and friends, church friends, singing friends. And they're people who've been with me through my journey. And I would say not only that, but the people who sponsor me have been there with me through my journey. And so every year I start in August and I say, hey guys, it's me again. And I'm going to be doing the run with my team, and I'll be writing you over the next 2 months to get us going.
And all of a sudden the number is $60,000. It's amazing.
It's easily that. It's easily that over these years, because we've raised over 10,000, and sometimes I think last year was 15.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Amazing.
Which is really great. Yeah.
Tracy Dahl, congratulations on being named to the Order of Manitoba. Enjoy your day when it comes. And thank you for being up early and telling us a little bit more about your love of the province and your phenomenal successes.
Oh, well, I was enjoying hearing you talk about being outside today. It's
yes.
Like we're all now in a place where I can love spring. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Go have a cup of coffee outside on me. I'm stuck in the studio.
Okay, sounds good.
Take care. Tracy Dahl, a Canadian coloratura soprano, one of 12 Manitobans announced yesterday who will receive the Order of Manitoba.
It really feels like you're trying to throw a plate of spaghetti on the wall and hoping something sticks.
The youth labor market is behaving as if the overall economy isn't just in recession, but is in a severe recession.
At the time, I'm 16, 17 years old. I'm not supposed to be giving my life to a 9-to-5 yet.
Young people don't always know how to interpret failure or rejection.
Struggling to get any job.
This week on Information Radio, it's The Young and the Jobless, a new series all about youth unemployment.
And that continues here this morning on InfoRad after 7 o'clock, so stay tuned. We will tell you in more detail after 6:30 what's coming up here. Next, though, Ottawa is doubling down on investments in the artificial intelligence economy, and in Manitoba, Las Vegas-based Jet AI and Vancouver-based Consensus Core announced plans to build an AI data center north of Île-des-Chênes in the rural municipality of Richard. As you heard on the news, some in the community are opposing the development, citing noise, light, and air pollution concerns. There's a petition against the project. There's more than 10,000 signatures on it. Now, earlier this week, AI Minister Evan Solomon announced a new cluster of data centers for BC. They're in partnership with TELUS. But as plans for digital innovation move ahead in many of our provinces, some critics say the whole process is being rushed. Mark Daly's here to weigh in, professor of computer science and Western University's chief AI officer. Good morning.
Morning.
So do you think the whole process is being rushed, or are we poised to do this and need to get on board?
I think we're doing this the right way, which is community by community. These are local decisions that are tremendously dependent on the local circumstances of each community.
The announcement is meant to boost Canada's sovereign computing capacity. Just for people who haven't been following all of this, what does that actually mean? Why do we need to do that?
Good question, because it kind of sounds like you're just going to put a Canadian flag on a server and now it's sovereign. And the reality is, of course, it's much more complex than that. Sovereignty is about having options. It means that Canadian companies, Canadian governments, institutions can access compute here under Canadian law with Canadian accountability when they need that.
You started by saying that you think that this isn't being rushed, that we're following the process. As you heard the local criticism in Île-des-Chênes, 10,000 signatures is a lot of people saying we're worried about a number of things. So how can those people feel like the process isn't being rushed? And what do you how do you speak to some of the concerns you've heard?
So we live in a liberal democracy, and what's happening in that community is exactly what should happen. Is the citizens of that community should communicate to their policymakers who they elected that we have this concern. And so things like building permits aren't decisions made by the federal government, they're decisions made by local government. And so local government can interact with the local community and can decline to build what the community doesn't want.
In terms of what the benefits are, what might make this an attractive for local communities to have a facility, nearby or in their town or community?
If you're in a community where you have access to green hydroelectricity, building a data center gives you an economic engine for your community and also allows you to participate in sort of ethical digital build out.
What are some of the environmental concerns being expressed where these projects are being built or proposed?
Biggest concern with the data center is power usage. So if you are powering that data center with by burning fossil fuels, then there's a huge carbon footprint associated with that. If you're able to power the data center with green electricity, then you get away from that problem altogether.
I mentioned TELUS is involved in the project in BC. There might be some saying that, we live in a country here that has long complained about telecom companies with too much power, right? So why should they or shouldn't they have a hand in this type of infrastructure?
I think it's a primarily pragmatic decision. There are not many entities in the world, and certainly in Canada, that have experience building data centers at this scale. Our telcos do for decades. And so I think this was a matter of finding a partner who had the necessary expertise and experience to be able to deliver on the product.
What gives you confidence that we have the right checks and balances in place? And what are those checks and balances that you see that make you feel good about this?
What makes me feel confident right now is that data centers are physical infrastructure, and we have a lot of regulation around who can build, when, where, what, how it connects to the power grid, who has say over that. And so that's infrastructure that we've built over a couple of centuries in this country. There is still room for us to talk about the digital side of regulation, but because it's a physical object and physical infrastructure, I'm optimistic that we have the right regulations in place.
So involving the public at a later stage, even after a building's up, it still means that there'll be the public consultation, in your view, will still have value because you'll be talking about the digital infrastructure.
Yes, engaging the public is always worthwhile. The data center affects the local community, and the local community should have that final say on what happens.
Thanks for weighing in this morning, Mark Daly. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
If you're in Ildershame, we'd love it for you to weigh in. And we know that a lot of you are thinking about it because, as we mentioned, 10,000 signatures on that local petition against an AI center that's proposed. Mark Daly, Professor of Computer Science and Western University's Chief AI Officer. We reached him live this morning on Information Radio. It is Wednesday. It is May 13th. Thanks for joining us here on the show. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Regular team back together. There's Corey Funk and Abby Adiyemi and Darren Marash behind the glass. Coming up, we have business news, and that means Crystalie Ramlacan's going to join us, another teammate. She's here talking about new data that shows global demand for electric vehicles is on the rise. So we'll get some details on that after your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 7 degrees, and this is much more like mid-May. It'll feel great today. Lots of sunshine, bit of a southerly breeze, and a high this afternoon of 23. An intellectually disabled man living in a Gimli group home became malnourished and died. It took 2 years for his family to find out how. CBC I-Team's Michelle Allen reports.
Shelley Schultz says she found her brother emaciated on a mattress on a care home floor.
Oh, it's terrifying. Have you ever seen somebody who starved? Like actually seen them and touched them? He was pure bones.
Sean Felstead died a month later in January 2024. His body weighed just 92 pounds on the autopsy table. Felstead was intellectually disabled and in 24/7 care. Schultz and her family now have a copy of the autopsy and a report from Manitoba's Provincial Investigation Unit. They reveal that he'd struggled to eat. Cause of death, sepsis from a urinary tract infection. Malnutrition contributed. The report found the group home didn't neglect Felstead. Workers took him to the Gimli Hospital, but it discharged him without figuring out what was wrong.
What is happening at Gimli Hospital that they kept sending him back to the residence when he was so clearly starving to death?
In a statement, the Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority says it can't discuss the province's investigation. Now, Schultz wants an inquest into her brother's death. Michelle Allen, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A woman in Ile-des-Chênes has started a grassroots backlash against a potential AI data center in her community. Jet AI and Consensus Core propose building a center across the road from Christy Little's home on about 140 acres of land. Little started an online petition which now has more than 10,000 signatures. She worries about potential light, noise, and air pollution.
We've been here for 20 years. We made our home here. We thought we were going to live here, for another 50 years, as long as we possibly could, because we absolutely love it here. So the concern that this is happening definitely makes a big question mark in our future.
The RM of Richat says it is aware of the petition and says it's seeking more information directly from the company. Meanwhile, Little wants a public hearing for people in the area to voice their concerns. The Union for Manitoba Teachers hopes it can forge a good relationship with the province's new Commissioner of Teacher Professional Misconduct. The government named veteran child safety advocate Noni Clausen to the post. Teacher Society President Lillian Clausen met with the Education Minister last week to share her priorities for the new commissioner.
Someone who knows what it's like to work in education, someone who is versed in trauma-informed healing, and so someone who's bilingual. It was certainly in a feminized profession, someone who's a woman, and so all of those criteria were met.
Clausen says the union wants to partner with the commissioner and is open to systemic changes in the way teachers are investigated if they are included in those discussions. A healthcare union says Winnipeg's largest private clinic is prioritizing profits over patient care. 5 cardiology techs at the Manitoba Clinic have issued a strike notice. They're set to walk off the job next week. The techs are represented by the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals. It says the clinic proposed wages on average 27% lower than the public sector. Jason Linkletter is president of the union.
I don't know how, on one hand, you sell that you're profiting millions of dollars, and on the other hand, saying that we're going to have to close if we give these people an increase that represents like 0.0015 of profits.
The owner of the clinic, Well Health, says it won't comment on negotiations. It says patient continuity plans are in place if needed. The former Vulcan Iron Works site caught fire again. Fire crews responded to a blaze in the vacant industrial site in Point Douglas after 4 yesterday afternoon. That site has suffered several significant fires since being gutted by a massive blaze in July 2023. The city says it believes yesterday's fire started by accident while contractors were working on the roof. The workers were able to get out safely before firefighters arrived. U.S. President Donald Trump is on his way to China. He will meet tomorrow with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Claire Lai is the daughter of Jimmy Lai, the Hong Kong media tycoon who was sentenced in February to 20 years in prison for breaking China's national security laws. She is urging Trump to raise her father's case with the leader of China.
So President Trump has expressed his commitment to freeing my father. I think the rule of law in Hong Kong is completely broken, that this is a solution that has to be solved leader to leader. And I am confident that President Trump will be the one to free my father.
Trump is taking a delegation of American business leaders to China, including Elon Musk and Tim Cook from Apple. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 7. And the Montreal Victoire beat the Minnesota Frost last night.
It's over! Reporter la victoire! Montreal has its trip to the final!
Montreal will now play the Ottawa Charge for the Walter Cup, an all-Canadian final round that starts Thursday. In the NHL, the Buffalo Sabres beat the Montreal Canadiens 3-2. Their series now tied at 2 games apiece. Game 5 is tomorrow night in Buffalo. You can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
If you want to see the weirdest goal that you've ever seen in your entire life, go back and look at the second goal that Buffalo had to tie that game before they went on to win against Montreal in the NHL last night.
I know, it kind of upset you a little bit.
It was weird. I don't know. I got into watching this last night. I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch it. Let's see how they do. And it was so exciting to just see all of the excited Canadian fans, right? I just thought that was cool. But it went... He dumped it in. Like literally the player from Buffalo dumped it in. And I guess they know exactly, well, of course they do, where the ice is, been Zambonied and where not, and how the puck will bounce, like I swear.
Really? So the Zamboni icing impacted?
Yeah, apparently they were analyzing this on the breaks and stuff, and they said that like every players and actually the goalie coaches, they throw pucks that could be dumped in. They mimic that to see where the weak spots are in any different arena. And they kind of see how the bounce is going to go. And this bounce and shot went off one of the crossbars, and the angle of it just slid into the side of the net. It was the weirdest thing.
Wow.
And they said it's actually something they could say, if you got to dump it in here, because when we were doing this pregame, now whether they did that or not, they're not sure, but they said that is something that goalie coaches do to kind of get them prepped.
So interesting. Science in sports.
I know.
Yeah.
It was not interesting for Montreal, though. It was like, what just happened?
Oh, no.
At any rate, thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
And great news about the Walter Cup as well, an all-Canadian final there. Let's get into what's happening in our regional forecast. We're going to be all smiles. Manitoba will be in a better mood today because of the weather.
Yes,
Abby.
Marcy, lots of sunshine already out. We started the day with clear skies, most of the regions. This is really setting the stage for more like the warm-up that we will be experiencing across the southern regions. Also, this is spreading towards the northern parts, though we saw some light snow into the lake this morning, starting the day around -2. Forecast for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley region already getting lots of sunshine. It's bright outside. We're going to see these mainly clear conditions expected to really hold steady through the day. Current temperatures, we're looking at 7 degrees at the Forks, 2 at the airport. Sunny conditions as mentioned. Temperatures are kind of feeling cool to start, but it's more like that mild, cool temperature you can tolerate. For the city, we're expecting a beautiful high of 23 today. For the southern regions, the Pembina Valley and the Westman region, similar conditions we're seeing there. 3 degrees, 4 degrees, sunshine there, warming up close to 27. The Parkland and Interlake region, Dauphin towards Gimli, we're seeing temperatures between 4 degrees and 0, clear skies, sunshine also there. Highs reaching 26 in the Parkland region, while for the Interlake region, a bit cool, around 19 degrees. That's the high I see there. Then we cross into the central parts and all the way up north. The Parfleet flown towards Norway House, clear, current temperature sitting around 2 degrees, highs of 19 tracking there. Then Thompson, Gillam, Lynn Lake, we're seeing sunny skies there already. Current temperatures hovering between, we're still seeing some areas having minus. So we're seeing -5 around Gillam, -2 around the Thompson area, and 1 degree around the Lynn Lake area. We're going to be seeing highs around 16 there. Then for Tudula Lake, -3, light snow tracking there, heading for a high of 8 degrees later. While for Churchill and the York region, we're looking at -4 there at this time, mostly cloudy. We'll see highs around 3 degrees, expected to fall to about -1 later in the afternoon. So more like widespread clearing conditions we're noticing across the province, while the south, we're finally warming up into the 20s, Marcy. Winnipeg,
right.
we get to 20 today. Right now, it's 7 at the Forks.
I like it. Sandal time. Corey Funk, the commute.
Yes. Really the only, the biggest construction issue right now is probably that ramp that takes you from northbound Pembina onto Abenoji-Mikina. It's closed for construction, and that is expected to last until June 19th. So expect delays there. If you haven't noticed already, it's been closed for a couple days now. Other than that, though, if you do see anything else going on out there, if you're walking your bike and you're driving, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
All right, Chris Lee Ramakan here with Business News. Hello.
Hi, good morning, Marcy.
Let's talk about electric vehicles. Apparently, there's new data that shows that global demand, at least, is on the rise. What else does it tell us?
Yes, so global demand for electric vehicles rose for a second straight month in April, as buyers, of course, face higher gas prices with the war in the Middle East. So registrations of new EVs and plug-in hybrids rose 6% compared to a year ago to 1.6 million. But there was a drop-off from the record high that we saw the month before in March. Now, the report says demand continues to be supported by things like policy incentives, rising fuel prices, and growing Chinese manufacturers. So in Europe, registrations climbed 27% to about 400,000 units. And countries in the European Economic Area and Switzerland have committed nearly 200 billion euros to their EV ecosystem. But the global picture was uneven. In China, registrations fell 8% after support for auto trade-ins was withdrawn and a tax break on EV purchases expired. But as I was saying, Chinese manufacturers have expanded abroad, with exports more than doubling last year's, reaching nearly 1.4 million units in the first 4 months of this year. Now, here in North America, registrations dropped 28% to just 120,000 units. And this is after the end of some U.S. tax credits and proposals by the Trump administration to further ease carbon dioxide emissions rules. Mexico, though, stood out with sales up nearly 50% this year, while Canada's 7% decline is expected to reverse after a new rebate incentive program was introduced here earlier this year.
To another story this morning, making business news. Post Media says they're getting out of the flyer business right now.
Yes, that's right. It says it's exiting the flyer distribution business as it adapts to shifting consumer behaviors and a changing media landscape. So the move will result in the loss of 50 full-time and 200 part-time jobs. The Toronto-based media company says it's working with clients and partners to ensure a smooth transition. So flyer distribution will be phased out beginning June 8th and will stop completely by the end of August. And Post Media says it's directing investment and resources toward the areas of greatest impact and opportunity. And it says the decision will allow it to keep pace with industry change and respond to consumer preferences. So, yeah, I thought this was interesting because, some people, there's a wide range of what people think about flyers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people say, have signs, don't put flyers in my mailbox, where other people, maybe rely on them to, get deals and, to budget their groceries. Yeah, cut coupons. Yeah.
Save a bit of money. Finally, before you go this morning, many industries are feeling, of course, the effects of the conflict in the Middle East, even the snack business.
Yes, that's right. So Japanese snack maker Calbee plans to switch to black and white packaging for some of its potato chips because of chemical shortages. So it says it's having difficulties getting raw materials such as a petrochemical used in paints and inks. So customers will no longer see the familiar colorful designs on the bags. However, the Japanese government says the country has secured enough oil-derived products to last into next year. So, they're a little puzzled by that. But, still, overall, worries about crude oil products have been building since the Strait of Hormuz was essentially closed in late February. So the liquid is used in the production of so many things, including plastics, drugs, and other goods. And then in India, aluminum containers have been in short supply since the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And Diet Coke is only sold in cans in India. So those able to get their hands on the drink have capitalized on the shortage by throwing Diet Coke themed parties, charging cover for the events, even raffling off cans at these events so people can have their fridge cigarettes, as they call them, at home. Trade logistics in Asia depend heavily on tight supply chains and fossil fuels from the Middle East.
Super interesting. Thank you for this, Crystalie.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
With business news this morning, that's Crystalie Ramlichan. Well, we're all talking about how nice it is. You see the sun streaming in that downtown Winnipeg shot if you've been watching on YouTube. We're going to get to a high of 23 degrees with sunshine in Winnipeg today. Nice and Brandon, too. Little windy, but you are also expecting a beautiful daytime high of 27. Hot, even. Yeah, pulling out the H word. And Thompson, sunny and 16 today. So with that in mind, there's going to be a lot of birds returning, but we have an unusual story about birds up next. There's a new CBC documentary exploring a fledgling movement in the birding world. Now, this is one that hopes to rename dozens of North American bird species because so many species names are actually tied to historical figures that are linked to racism and colonialism, like the Townsend warbler.
Townsend, while he was a celebrated ornithologist and expert on birds, was a grave robber. He is often depicted as a well-meaning naturalist, but what they conveniently omit is that he desecrated the graves of indigenous peoples, collecting skulls to dabble in a little pseudoscience, just to affirm his own racial biases.
Townsend's warbler is not the only example of that, right? There are so many birds named after problematic people. To have a little bird that has been here forever, that's so beautiful and so important in the ecosystem and does an incredible migration and a journey, to have to hold that name and carry that around is insulting.
How interesting, right? That's a clip from the documentary Bird Names. It's available on CBC Gem and YouTube if you want to check it out. Two Canadian sisters are behind the documentary film. CBC spoke with filmmakers Aliyah Jasmine and Eliza Savani about the project.
Around 150 bird species were identified that needed name changes. In the wake of the racial justice uprisings that we saw in 2020 following George Floyd's murder, a lot of different organizations spoke up, and we saw that here in Canada with the universities changing their names. And the AOS, the American Ornithological Society, was among one of those organizations who came forward and said, we do have problematic names for some of our species and we would like to start. So a lot of birding organizations started identifying them.
So our film really focuses on the Townsend's warbler as an example, but there's plenty. There's Hammond's flycatcher, there's Bachman's sparrow, Lewis's nutcracker. There's many troubling legacies, many that have to do with slave ownership or desecrating Indigenous graves, naturalists testing scientific theories, racial legacies.
This journey really follows this wildlife film crew who are genuinely bird lovers as they try to track this Townsend's warbler, one of the first birds whose name is supposed to be changing. And we wanted to see it while it was migrating through Victoria, but before its name got changed. And it's a very elusive bird. But through this journey of trying to find this bird and really contemplating what these name changes mean to our film crew, who are all, from marginalized communities, we found Papakie, who really brought this other side of the story, which is that this isn't the first time these names will be changing. They all had names before. But I think once you're really into birding, you spend years and years and years learning all these really hard bird names and how to identify them and how to identify them differently. So to then go back to a lot of people who have been birding for years and for generations and try to convince them to change the names is actually speaking on logistics is really hard to do because they've memorized all these names. But I guess the argument here is that you can keep using the names that you want. If you like to use Townsend's warbler and that means something to the 1% of you that likes the name, then go ahead and keep using it. But for the rest of us, where there really is this barrier to entry, and for me and for my daughter, who's a person of color, to find a bird you've been looking for years and then see that bird, and in the minute that you have that joy of finally identifying this gorgeous bird, remembering that the person it was named after really did not like people that looked like you, is heartbreaking.
Now I'm Googling names of birds. That is Aliyah Jasmine and Eliza Savani. They're two of the filmmakers behind the new CBC documentary that you can check out on Gem called Bird Names. You can stream it there. You can also watch it on YouTube.
The puck may have dropped on the playoffs, but the news doesn't stop for hockey. I'm Brittany Greenslade, host of CBC Winnipeg News at 6. To get your local news, stream CBC Winnipeg News at 6, 24/7 on CBC Gem, the CBC News app, and selected streaming platforms. CBC Winnipeg News at 6, your local news on your favorite streaming device.
10-7, you're with CBC, and next let's go south of the border. U.S. President Donald Trump touches down in Beijing this morning, as we've been hearing on World Report. He's there for a 2-day state visit, face-to-face meetings as well with China's President Xi Jinping. Looming over the visit is the Iran war. The U.S. started with Israel 2 months ago and has not been able to end, causing global instability, as you know. To talk about what this meeting of the leaders might mean, though, Charles Burton joins us via Zoom. He's an expert on China. He's a senior fellow at the Synopsis think tank at Charles University in Prague. Thank you for being with us to weigh in today. We appreciate your time.
It's good to speak with you, Marcy.
So Trump went to China for a state visit 10 years ago. How has China changed since then? And how much more powerful is President Xi Jinping now for people that might not understand?
Well, I mean, certainly the big change has been in high tech. China has moved ahead considerably in that regard. And China has a lot of leverage over the United States because China has unfortunately acquired a near monopoly on the mining and processing of rare earths that are essential to U.S. high-tech development. So the U.S. wants some kind of assurance that China will continue to allow the U.S. to import critical minerals, rare earths. And China would like to see the U.S. remove its restrictions on the export to China of very high-end chips that China's not able to produce itself, at least not yet. So, you get a dynamic here where Mr. Xi is more confident about his ideological program that he articulated after he came into power 10 years ago, that China will become the dominant power on the planet because the United States is a nation in decline, the community of the common destiny of mankind, as he puts it. So when you see the dynamic between Trump and Xi, are the Chinese going to try and play it that China, as the middle kingdom, is receiving a supplicant and that China has the upper hand in the relationship and that the U.S. needs China's compliance with U.S. trade and geostrategic demands, particularly on the Iran war, which is clearly not going well for the United States. Mm-hmm. And in return, China would like concessions on Taiwan.
And then what will Trump do with that if he's received as lesser, for lack of a better word here? You mentioned the war. I wonder how involved China might become in helping end the war, because that's what Trump needs, right?
I mean, China is the main ally of Iran, providing Iran with weaponry and logistical support. China has maybe 90 days worth of oil reserves itself. So even though it receives maybe 40% of its energy, oil and natural gas, through the Strait of Hormuz, they don't need it right away. And I think they're quite happy to see the United States draw down its weaponry in this essentially fruitless action, because that gives China some advantage in possible future annexing of Taiwan. Obviously, if the war leads to a massive global recession, that will affect China disproportionately, because the Chinese economy is not going well. There's a housing crisis, there's high unemployment, there's a demographic crisis of an aging population, and low consumer demand. So China is selling overproduction abroad to sustain its prosperity. If there was a recession, that would be severely inhibited. So, it's a mixed bag here, but I don't think Mr. Xi is going to be giving Mr. Trump any assurances that they can work together to restore peace in the Middle East. It's not in China's interest to do so.
I'm curious what you think about the trade issues as it factors into Canada, because of course Prime Minister Carney already met with Xi Jinping, was already in China and trying to make those inroads and create new markets, because we don't have the same relationship with the United States. How should Canadians view this meeting today? Like, I'm wondering if what groundwork we've covered now could be threatened, maybe the wrong word, but by whatever transpires today, if China decides they're going to work with the U.S., could what we've established already be, I guess threatened is the right word.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, in general, I think our experience is that any kind of trade deal that we do with either China or the U.S. is very hard to enforce. So, they just don't do what they promise. I mean, in the 2017 visit, Trump announced $250 billion in increased trade with China, and then in 2020 another $200 billion, and neither side fulfilled what they'd promised to do. So we have a situation here where we've got concessions on China to continue to import our canola seeds, but it's only a 9-month deal. It runs from March until the end of December, whereas we've committed to accept Chinese electric vehicles over a long, several-year span with an increasing numbers year by year. The Chinese ambassador made a rather nasty statement in an interview suggesting that this so-called strategic partnership between Canada and China would be threatened if Canada continues to allow members of Parliament to visit Taiwan or continues our freedom of navigation exercises through the Taiwan Strait. And the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi is scheduled to visit Canada in the next few weeks and will probably strengthen that kind of rhetoric. So this idea that China might be the salvation for the Trump tariff policies and reshoring of the auto industry and so on may not bear out. And in any event, Canada's total external commodity trade to China is only 4%. So it's not actually a big factor in our overall exports compared to, say, 3 times that number for Europe and Britain combined, and the potential for the Trans-Pacific Partnership and Europe and Nordic country trade. So I think we do have a problem with China, and I think Mr. Carney ought to be looking to other areas and not putting so much stock in the China option.
Really grateful for you weighing in with your expertise today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is Charles Burton with us live, expert on China and a senior fellow at the Synopsis think tank at Charles University in Prague. We're going to hear more about this visit between Trump and Xi Jinping coming up at 7 on World Report. It's 3 minutes to right now. Also, we're going to continue our series here locally on youth unemployment in Manitoba, the young and the jobless. We're exploring why today's economy is not more welcoming to young workers.
The youth labor market is behaving as if the overall economy isn't just in recession, but is in a severe recession.
We're going to hear from that person, a former chief economic analyst at Statistics Canada, about his take on youth unemployment and why so many people just can't land jobs. In addition, in the next hour of the show, the impact of e-records. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj with a really interesting medical column. The benefits, but also the downsides of having more digital health information available to doctors and patients. So stay tuned. That's all coming up in the next hour of Information Radio. On CBC right now, it's sunny outside. That's nice, hey? It's 7 degrees already in downtown Winnipeg. At the airport, it's 2. We're heading for a high of 23, and the commute's looking fine. Heather Wells joins us now ahead of 7 o'clock with more news headlines.
Well, a family wants answers after a disabled man living in a group home died malnourished in hospital. 54-year-old Sean Felstad weighed only 92 pounds when he died in 2024. He died a month after his sister saw him at that Gimli group home. Shelley Schultz says his appearance was an absolute shock. His family now calling for an inquest. And 5 workers at Winnipeg's largest private health clinic are set to walk out of the job next Tuesday. Cardiology techs at the Manitoba Clinic issued strike notice yesterday. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thanks.
And for a look at the world, international and global news coming up, as well as obviously national news. World Report is next right here on 89.3. Stay with us. 1 minute to 7 o'clock. Thanks for being with us on this sunny Wednesday.
On the current.
It is 26,000 kilometers from the southern tip of Argentina to Alaska, and Quebec's Olivia Caz is traveling it on horseback. She started it last year, thinks she might be on the road for at least half a decade. What you see in slow travel coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. Donald Trump and Xi Jinping have a full agenda as the U.S. president arrives in China. In addition to the Iran war, the two leaders are expected to grapple with trade and technology. If Trump gets the deal he wants there, some observers say President Xi will demand concessions on Taiwan. And that has people in the self-governing island worried about their future. Philippe Leblanc has more from Taipei.
In the Taipei basement, a dozen civilians fire air guns at targets. As anxiety grows ahead of the summit between Presidents Trump and Xi, they say they need to prepare. Taiwan's interests are also America's interests, says this man, so we need to deter China from invading us. For many here, the concern is that support for Taiwan could be part of a broader deal between Washington and Beijing. William Yang, a senior analyst with Crisis Group, says Trump has already broken with decades of U.S. practice by publicly saying he would discuss Taiwan arms sales with Xi Jinping.
Just the declaration of planning to discuss this topic with Xi Jinping is already undermining the long-standing trust.
Yang adds that Taiwan fears even subtle changes in American rhetoric or support could weaken deterrence against China, which claims the democratic island as its own territory. In Copenhagen Tuesday, Taiwan President Lai Ching-te remotely thanked the U.S. for strengthening the island's defense capabilities.
The people of Taiwan, they will never bow to pressure.
Trump and Xi are to meet Thursday and Friday in Beijing. Philippe Leblanc, CBC News, Taipei.
BC's Supreme Court will deliver its verdict today in the trial of a former RCMP officer accused of colluding with China. William Miker is accused of taking part in a global Chinese plan to bully wanted expats into returning home. As Georgie Smythe reports, Miker maintains his innocence.
Really don't want to comment too much while things are still underway, but I'm anxious to get home to my family.
William Miker pleaded not guilty to one count of engaging in preparatory acts to commit an offence under Canada's Security of Information Act. The former RCMP officer, who once specialised in financial crimes, denies allegations he was working for the Chinese government to prepare a campaign of intimidation against a multi-millionaire Chinese expat who lives in BC. A man China says fled the country with hundreds of millions of dollars. To prove their case, Crown prosecutors used an email Miker sent to a colleague in 2017, where he talked about a, quote, fraudster wanted by Chinese police. Crown lawyers argued it was clear Miker was referring to a Chinese national in BC and were expected to call a key witness to prove that argument. But instead, they shocked the courtroom in closing their case without him. The prosecution says it's presented a range of facts that Miker was laying the groundwork for a campaign of extortion, one that was an affront to Canadian sovereignty.
I think I'm a pretty straight, honest guy.
On the final day of the judge-only trial, Miker's counsel told the court the Crown's case is purely circumstantial, based mostly on a narrow reading of 2 paragraphs from that email, and that criminal intent had not been proven. A verdict is expected today. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
CNN is reporting the Central Intelligence Agency is carrying out operations against cartel members in Mexico. It says since last year, CIA operatives have been involved in everything from intelligence sharing to assassination operations inside Mexico's borders. A CIA spokesperson says the reporting is false and salacious, and it puts American lives at risk. The Mexican government is also denying the reports. Last month, 2 U.S. officials died in a car crash in northern Chihuahua. Sources told Reuters at the time they were CIA officers taking part in a drug raid. Critics are urging stronger oversight of Canada's international visa hubs. They're run by a federal contractor, which is funded by hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars. But internal records obtained by CBC News reveal allegations of third-party fraud and security red flags. As Priscilla Kisang Huang reports, it appears those issues were already on the Immigration Department's radar.
It's a fraud. It's not justifiable.
Ottawa's Salah Uddin says in recent years his family ran into issues at a visa office in Dhaka, Bangladesh. It's run by VFS Global, a company with $770 million in federal deals since 2012 to operate visa hubs in more than 100 countries on behalf of Canada. Uddin says in the case of his loved ones, third-party resellers were block booking appointments, then trying to overcharge for slots.
How can that be ethical?
Masood Rana says he felt he had to pay $300 to VFS for its premium service just to get his family's application in on time.
I don't think it's just.
Their experiences line up with issues flagged in internal government documents, which took CBC 2 years to obtain. The records show officials were aware of third-party misconduct, security screening concerns in Bangladesh, and a malware attack in Russia. One government official's email alluding to third-party misconduct Misconduct says we could write a novel about all the fraud we are seeing. Immigration lawyer Karina Juma.
These issues are still very prevalent today and will continue to happen unless IRCC takes further action.
In a statement, VFS says it uses strict anti-fraud protections and security checks for staff. It says premium services are optional. Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada says its oversight is robust and it takes fraud allegations seriously. It adds VFS has met its contract expectations. Priscilla Gizon-Huang, CBC News, Ottawa.
Keir Starmer is still clinging to his job as British Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party, but he has a lot of work to do to shore up support. In Parliament this morning, King Charles delivered a speech laying out the Starmer government's priorities, including long-promised changes to education, health, and the courts. But it appears that is not enough to satisfy critics. Starmer's health minister, Wes Streeting, is rumoured to be launching a leadership challenge as early as tomorrow. Australia's government is trying to make it easier for young people to buy a home. Real estate there is among the most expensive in the world, so the government is scaling back tax breaks for property investors. Australia's Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, says it could help 75,000 primarily younger people enter the housing market.
The status quo is busted in the housing market and in the tax system, and where those two things intersect creates a level of intergenerational inequity that we're not prepared to tolerate.
The move is controversial. Just before last year's election, the Labour government had promised not to make changes to its tax policy for investors, but electoral power in Australia is shifting to younger generations. One of the largest coffee chains in the United States is coming back to Canada. There are plans for hundreds of Dunkin Donuts locations to open in this country in the coming years. But as our business reporter Anis Hadari reports, the brand previously struggled in Canada.
I absolutely cannot wait.
Flight attendant Jay Antflick loves Dunkin Donuts iced coffee. He buys it whenever he flies to the U.S.
Usually 2 to 3 a day.
2 to 3
so
a
this
day?
Is gonna be, oh, yeah. That's how I run on coffee.
He won't have to run far by the end of the year. Foodtastic, the Montreal company behind Second Cup, says it's bringing Dunkin Donuts to Canada.
And all our franchisees are going to be local Canadian franchisees.
Peter Mammis is the president of Foodtastic. He says he sees opportunity even in a softer economy.
The quick service restaurants are having a little bit of a lull, but I think that's actually a benefit to us bringing Dunkin in now because there's going to be a lot more real estate available to us.
In the 2010s, the last few Dunkin franchises in Canada folded under other ownership, in part blaming a lack of investment to fight Tim Hortons. University of Toronto marketing professor David Soberman says Tim's is still a big competitor.
And they have somewhere around 4,000 outlets, so even if Dunkin opens a couple of hundred outlets, it's still very small compared to Tim Hortons.
Is there room for more brands to enter into the Canadian market? I think so.
Robert Carter is with the Coffee Association of Canada. Its members include both Tim Hortons and the new operators of Dunkin.
Canadians are amongst the highest in terms of coffee consumption. It's not surprising that brands such as, Dunkin's are looking at Canada as that natural extension.
The first outlets are planned for Toronto and Montreal, so while the slogan says America runs on Dunkin', most of Canada will have to wait. Anis Hadari, CBC News, Calgary.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to a sunny start to your Wednesday. And guess what? It's not going to cloud over today. It's going to finish this way. We look like we're going to get to a high that could be over 20. Thanks for joining us on Information Radio. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. As mentioned, I'm Marcy Marcusa. This hour on the program, we have a story from CBC Manitoba's I-Team. A family is calling for an inquest after a Manitoba man living with intellectual disabilities died after living with significant malnourishment. The I-Team's Kristen Annabel will be here at 10 to 8 to tell us more about the man's sister's 2-year journey to learn what happened to her brother. So stay tuned for more details in that story. Also this hour on the program, modernizing medical record keeping. We're going to talk to Dr. Raj Bhardwaj on our medical column about a new report about electronic health information, what's good about it and what are the downsides. We begin, though, with our continuing series on youth unemployment in Manitoba. So stay tuned for another installment of The Young and the Jobless. Right now, here is Heather Wells with other headlines.
Good morning. Well, a woman in Ile-des-Chênes has started a grassroots backlash against a potential AI data center in her community. Jet AI and Consensus Core propose building a center across the road from Christy Little's home. Little started an online petition which now has more than 10,000 names. She worries about the potential light, noise, and air pollution. We're going to hear more about that. And the Union for Manitoba Teachers hopes it can forge a good relationship with the province's new Commissioner of Teacher Professional Misconduct. The government named veteran child safety advocate Noni Clausen to that post. The president of the Teachers Society says the union wants to partner with the commissioner and is open to systemic changes in the way teachers are investigated if they are included in the discussions. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
Thanks.
Abby.
Oh, Marcy, we're already looking at mainly sunny skies dominating the province right now. Really more like a spring condition. We're really, for the first time, really enjoying it. Clear conditions across the regions. For Winnipeg, expect this beautiful sunny day to stick with us. We will notice some breezy southern winds developing. Current temperatures, we're seeing it between 5 degrees and 7, depending on where you are in the city. Temperatures going to be hovering around this 7 degrees before we touch the 23 later today, and that's the condition across most regions. Some areas in the south might even get to 26 today. We're talking about regions in the Dauphin area. While up north, we're just seeing temperatures hover between -5 and 5 degrees.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
With your morning commute, here's Corey Funk.
Yeah, very quiet commute overall. Of course, I'm just going to flag the issue that's been a problem for a couple of days. There's that construction that takes on the ramp that takes you from northbound Pembina onto Abenoji-Mikana. That ramp is closed until June 19th for construction. It's been closed for a couple days now, so just flagging that for folks. If you do see anything else though going on out there, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, let's return to CBC Manitoba's series on youth unemployment. Unprecedented is a word that a lot of young people in Canada are unfortunately very used to. From a global pandemic to global politics, Gen Z is no stranger to instability, and that includes financial instability. So one expert says for an economy not in a recession, the current level of youth unemployment is also unprecedented, and that the federal government is to blame. Philip Cross is a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute and a former chief economic analyst at Statistics Canada. He's the author of a new study. It's called The Extraordinary Increase of Youth Unemployment in Canada, and I'm pleased to say he's part of our series today. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for being here with your expertise. Why don't we start with your reaction? Like, what is your reaction to the current levels then of youth unemployment?
My reaction is I was surprised at how bad it was. I mean, I think we're all aware that youth are having a difficult time these days. And it's easy for people of my generation to go, well, it's always difficult transitioning into the labor market. What's new? What's really new about that? But when you dig into the numbers, this really is an unusually severe circumstance for youth. The youth labor market is behaving as if the overall economy isn't just in recession, but is in a severe recession. The types of recession we had in the early 1980s, the early 1990s, and again with the great financial crisis in 2008. And yet we look at the overall economy, again, it's Canada, my former stomping ground, just published employment numbers this morning, and they show the economy overall is not doing great, but it's not in recession either. So it raises the question, if the overall economy is in recession, why is the youth labor market behaving as if it is in a severe recession? And that's what motivated our study.
Now, I mentioned some of the things that you cite that happened for how we got here, but can you talk about how those things specifically impact youth unemployment or the way that the economy is reacting in that area in terms of those things, the factors of how we got here?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's look at we looked at this in terms of a lot of dimensions. It's not just that youth unemployment is high, but all the dimensions of it are worrisome. For example, youth unemployment is high, but the duration of these unemployment spells is also very long. And we're not seeing that for adults. We're seeing the gap between youth and adult unemployment at historically high levels. We compared youth unemployment in Canada and the US, and lo and behold, the situation in Canada is much worse than the US. So we could rule out some factors like technology. We know, for example, the US is much further ahead in adopting technology such as artificial intelligence that might explain some job loss. So we were able to rule that out. And we were also able to rule out factors such as, it's not youth themselves that are to blame. It's not that they lack the skills or the personality characteristics that would make them unattractive to employers. Because we looked at your neighbors next door in Alberta, for example, and youth and even teenagers there are doing relatively well. So it seems that if you have a healthy overall economy, youth can still find their way in today's labor market. So we were looking at, what is it specifically that's accounting for high levels of youth unemployment? And we found the conclusion was, on the one hand, it was federal government policies about immigration. We let a lot of, especially unskilled, uneducated youth into this country, which toughened up competition for youth to get jobs. And at the same time, provincial governments had substantially increased minimum wages over the last couple of decades, and that choked off demand. And any economist would tell you, if you substantially increase supply and at the same time substantially lower demand, you're going to have a very bad outcome. And that's exactly what we're seeing for youth in this country in today's labor market.
On immigration, Ottawa lowered the amount of temporary residents allowed entry into Canada quite a lot, by about 47%, as you know. And we have felt the impact in Manitoba. Universities, colleges, fewer international students in those. Even some programs have been closed and seats are being reduced. So shouldn't we have seen a shift in the unemployment numbers by now?
Well, we've seen a very small shift. I mean, it's true that population growth in this country has, just in the last year, has slowed dramatically from 3% a year ago to virtually nothing in the past year. And we've seen, and this seems to have stopped the actual increase in unemployment, but we're not seeing significant reductions yet. Again, I go back to even this morning's latest release of the unemployment numbers from StatCan doesn't show much improvement for youth. So it staunched the bleeding. It's helped the situation from getting worse. But it's going to take either some outright reductions in immigration levels, some reduction of the supply of labor, or some modification to our minimum wage laws. I'm thinking, for example, in this country, we used to have a separate minimum wage for teenagers. We used to recognize that teenagers have an especially difficult time getting into the labor market, getting that all-important first job where you can build up a resume and show employers that you have skills and you can be reliable. So we used to have a lower minimum wage for teenagers. And I think it may take something like that, something drastic, to get a substantial improvement in job prospects for youth in this country.
There's other factors that are often blamed for youth unemployment rates. I just want to mention a few that haven't come up here, like the aging workforce. Competing for jobs with youth is one of the narratives. Poor work ethic, you've already addressed that, saying don't blame the youth. Yeah. AI replacing jobs. What are your thoughts on the validity to some of those ideas that we haven't addressed yet?
Well, AI, we looked at, that the situation in the youth amongst American youth isn't as dire as here, and yet Americans are much further down the road in adopting technologies such as artificial intelligence. So I think we can pretty much rule that one out. The work ethic, that youth lack skills and so on, we addressed that.
Yep.
The other one is the aging of the labor force. If anything, the aging of the labor force should be creating opportunities for our youth.
But I'm just going to interject here, I guess. I guess the whole point of that one is that people are getting older. The economy is people are struggling. People are working longer. That you might hire, and you have this big boomer generation, and then you have big younger generations, right? In the 80s, you had a little younger generation, Gen Z, so not as many competing. that maybe of somebody that still needs to make some money in those older years is going to get a job over a young person, but it might be like that entry level job just to make a little bit of cash. Is that true or not? Do we know?
Basically, it's not true. The participation rate for older workers, people of my generation, for example, is still coming down. I mean, what's different is that more of us are staying active in the labor force than in previous generations. It used to be, the goal was to retire at age 55. Well, that's out the window. People have found that's boring. It doesn't provide much income. So people are staying in the labor force until they're 65, 70, but eventually they are still retiring. And as our population ages, we're seeing the overall participation rate of older workers decline. So I'd still go back to it. I don't think it's a case of older workers are staying in the labor force and keeping their jobs. In a lot of industries, we still need workers in this country, and particularly in areas where older workers, frankly, cannot stay much longer. Things that require physical effort, agriculture, construction. We know in these industries, there's shortages of people, and there's, again, opportunities for young people, and yet they're not being hired. And so I go back to, there has to be some other factors. And I look at the substantial increase in the supply of, especially of young people, and the reduction of demand from much higher minimum wages.
So just as a last question, what worries you the most about this situation, about youth unemployment in our country, if we don't find some type of a solution?
Well, again, I go back to that there's a great deal of literature that if young people have trouble early in their careers finding that first job and getting established in the labor market, it's going to depress their lifetime earnings. So this is a situation, this isn't just a recession where after a couple of years it blows over and things pick up and everything's hunky-dory and we go back to where we were. This can have a lasting, permanent, depressing effect on the job opportunities and income streams for today's youth. So that's what worries me about this.
Mr. Cross, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Philip Cross, Senior Fellow at the Fraser Institute and a former Chief Economic Analyst at Statistics Canada. He's the author of a new report called The Extraordinary Increase of Youth Unemployment in Canada, and part of our series on youth unemployment in Manitoba this week. We did talk to him last week. You might have caught that because he was on the day that the latest unemployment numbers came on, and he was referring to that. We asked the federal government to respond to Cross's concerns. Now, in an email, a spokesperson said, in part, through Budget 2025, the government invested $1.5 billion in skills development and employment opportunities for young people. The investment will support approximately 175,000 opportunities for youth in 2026-27 alone, and includes $600 million almost over 2 years for Canada Summer Jobs to support up to 100,000 jobs in summer 2026 this year. More than $300 million is in the budget over 2 years to maintain supports to around 20,000 youth per year through the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy programs. They provide employment, training, and wraparound support, especially for those facing barriers to employment. And the feds also were citing more than $635 million over 3 years for the Student Work Placement Program to support around 55,000 work-integrated learning opportunities in 2026-2027. But if you're a young person in this province or you're an employer in this province, we would love for you to weigh in. What's it like for you to look for work in Manitoba? As our youth unemployment series continues, what would you like us to understand about it? Or if you're an employer, how are you working to employ youth? You can always call us 788-3205.
The puck may have dropped on the playoffs, but the news doesn't stop for hockey. I'm Brittany Greenslade, host of CBC Winnipeg News at 6. To get your local news, stream CBC Winnipeg News at 6, 24/7 on CBC Gem, the CBC News app, and selected streaming platforms. CBC Winnipeg News at 6, your local news on your favorite streaming device.
Time for morning sports on CBC at 7:25 and a sunny morning. It's 7 degrees, our high 23. And if you're in Montreal, you're smiling for all kinds of reasons. Paul McGowan is here this morning with sports. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
We will get to the Montreal storylines. There's more than one, but let's start with the Bombers now through opening 3 days of training camp.
gearing up for a new season and hoping to put some of the disappointment of last season behind them. And to that end, one of the players drawing focus yesterday, it was defensive lineman Willie Jefferson, now 35 years old, ancient in CFL terms, but 2 years younger than me. Coming off a down year statistically, just 3 sacks for Jefferson in 2025. But Coach Mike O'Shea says that, especially in the case of Jefferson, he isn't worried about the numbers.
The idea of the stat of a sack can be overrated. How close you are to the quarterback and how you affect the play, how often you affect the play would be more important to measure. He affects a ton of plays, and a lot of times you wouldn't even notice it. But the play call says that they're doing that because of Willie. He's ageless, timeless, however you want to describe it.
Glowing terms for Jefferson. O'Shea also talked about him playing the part of veteran leader at camp and helping guys get acclimated. And still lots of runway for the Bombers to do that before their first preseason action that comes next Saturday.
Let's head to the PWHL. For the first time in league history, a Canadian team is going to take home the Walter Cup.
Yeah, the matchup that Canadian fans were hoping for, an Ottawa-Montreal final after the Victoire knocked off the defending champion Minnesota Frost last night. Montreal wins 2-1 in Game 5, and who else would score the winner but Marie-Philippe Poulin? A power play goal early in the third period is the difference. Victoire head coach Corey Chevry, though, made clear that it wasn't one goal or even one game that put Montreal in the final.
I think it's our biggest win in our organization's history. We had to fight tooth and nail against a team like Minnesota. It wasn't easy. It just shows a lot of what we've been through as an organization for 3 years. Like, it's not just overnight that a win like that happens. This group really showed up for our organization.
And that group gets through to a Walter Cup final for the first time ever. And beyond this being an all-Canadian matchup, the matchup in net is incredible. It's Team Canada starter Anne-Renee Desbiens backstopping the Victoire. Team USA backup Gwyneth Phillips in goal for the Charge, easily the 2 best goalies in the playoffs, and they will face each other in the final. The goalie nerd in me loves it. Montreal and Ottawa begin the Walter Cup final on Thursday.
Okay, goalie nerd, then walk us through the NHL game last night. Montreal,
oh my goodness,
losing, and Buffalo's tying goal was just weird.
Oh, yeah. As a goaltender, and Marcy, I've given up my fair share of bad goals. This one you can't fault Jakub Dobeš for. The Habs were looking okay, up 2-1 in the second period last night, and then this happens.
Oh, it's in! Unbelievable. Unreal. I don't think I've ever seen that. Crazy bounce that hit Dobeš, who didn't see it coming, and it's in the back of the net.
The puck there bounces off a stanchion by the Zamboni doors, turns at about a 90-degree angle, and gets past Montreal goalie Jakub Dobeš, a goal that would not have looked out of place with Yakety Sax playing in the background. Montreal goes on to lose 3-2. That best-of-7 series is now tied at 2. Game 5 goes on Thursday.
Totally weird.
Totally weird. And just, yeah. I mean, it's tough when that happens in the regular season. In that kind of a moment, I know. I feel for him.
Yep. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Paul McGowan filling in for Scott this morning on Morning Sports. We're coming up to news time at 7:30. Thanks for joining us here on Information Radio. Each and every morning we're here with you until 8:37 a.m. It's just about an hour left in the show. After 8 o'clock in the program, we have ongoing coverage of a story we started talking about yesterday. City Councillor Cindy Gilroy was with us on InfoRad. She was talking about her concerns about open drug use in the West End, which is her ward, particularly near Portage and Sherbrooke. And she was talking about Gordon Bell High School. So today we are going to talk to the superintendent that is in charge of, Winnipeg 1, which is Gordon Bell High School's division, about what he has to say about some of the concerns around the school. So that's coming up after 8 o'clock on the show. But right after the news here locally at 7:30, we are going to be hearing about our medical records in this country, e-records. What's the upside and the downside of having electronic records in our healthcare system? That's with Dr. Raj Bhardwaj after your CBC News from Manitoba.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's 7 degrees, beautiful sunshine. You are going to love today. Finally feeling like mid-May. A bit of a southerly breeze, lots of sun, and a high of 23. An intellectually disabled man living in a Gimli group home became malnourished and died. It took 2 years for his family to find out how. CBC I-Team's Michelle Allen has the story.
Shelley Schultz says she found her brother emaciated on a mattress on a care home floor.
Oh, it's terrifying. Have you ever seen somebody who starved? Like actually seen them and touched them? He was pure bones.
Sean Felstead died a month later in January 2024. His body weighed just 92 pounds on the autopsy table. Felstead was intellectually disabled and in 24/7 care. Schultz and her family now have a copy of the autopsy and a report from Manitoba's Provincial Investigation Unit. They reveal that he'd struggled to eat. Cause of death? Sepsis from a urinary tract infection. Malnutrition contributed. The report found the group home didn't neglect Felstead. Workers took him to the Gimli Hospital, but it discharged him without figuring out what was wrong.
What is happening at Gimli Hospital that they kept sending him back to the residence when he was so clearly starving to death?
In a statement, the Interlake Eastern Regional Health Authority says it can't discuss the province's investigation. Now, Schultz wants an inquest into her brother's death. Michelle Allen, CBC News, Winnipeg.
You can hear more on this CBC I-Team story coming up in the next half hour right here on Information Radio. A woman in Ile-des-Chênes has started a grassroots backlash against a potential AI data center in her community. Jet AI and Consensus Core propose building a center across the road from Christy Little's home on about 140 hectares of land. Little started an online petition, which now has more than 10,000 signatures. She worries about potential light, noise, and air pollution.
We've been here for 20 years. We made our home here. We thought we were going to live here, for another 50 years as long as we possibly could because we absolutely love it here. So the concern that this is happening definitely makes a big question mark in our future.
The RM of Richot says it is aware of the petition and says it's seeking more information directly from the company. Meanwhile, Little wants a public hearing for people in the area to voice their concerns. The Manitoba Teachers Society is confident in the province's choice for a new commissioner of teacher professional misconduct. The government has named veteran child safety advocate Noni Clausen to that post. Teachers Society President Lillian Clausen met with the Education Minister last week to share her priorities for the new commissioner. She says Clausen has worked in the kindergarten to grade 12 system, is well versed in trauma-informed healing, and is bilingual. Clausen hopes she will keep an open mind.
She was a person who was always looking out for the underdog in the situation. And so we just want somebody coming in who's objective and maybe considering that the underdog might not always be on the opposite end of who the teacher is. And so there's lots of different experiences.
Clausen says the union is open to systemic changes in the way teachers are investigated if they are included in the discussions. 5 workers at Winnipeg's largest private health clinic are set to walk off the job next Tuesday. Cardiology techs at the Manitoba Clinic issued strike notice yesterday. Their union, the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals, says Well Health has proposed wages on average 27% lower than the public sector. Association President Jason Linkletter says that is unacceptable.
The fact that essential services discussions were declined by Well Health speaks to the priority of investor profit over patient care. Patient-centered care is a priority for Manitobans, and it's clear that is not part of the equation for Well Health.
BC-based Well Health purchased the Manitoba Clinic in 2023, about a year after the Sherbrooke Street Clinic filed for creditor protection. Well Health says it won't comment on negotiations. It says patient continuity plans are in place if needed. U.S. President Donald Trump has just landed in Beijing. Air Force One touching down about half an hour ago, and Trump being received in grand style as he starts his state visit to China. Donald Trump and Xi Jinping have a full agenda as the U.S. president arrives there. In addition to the Iran war, the two leaders are expected to grapple with trade and technology. The former Vulcan Iron Works site caught fire again. Fire crews responded to the blaze at the vacant industrial site in Point Douglas after 4 yesterday afternoon. The site has suffered several significant fires since it was gutted by a massive blaze in July 2023. The city says it believes yesterday's fire started by accident while contractors were working on the roof. The workers were able to get out safely before firefighters arrived. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Here's Abby with our regional forecast.
Yeah, Marcy, mainly sunny skies dominating the province today in the Red River Valley region. We're expecting a beautiful sunny day here in the city. Some fog patches spotted early in the morning, but that's dissipated. Now we're seeing more like breezy southern winds are developing. Current temperatures, we're looking at 5 degrees and 7, depending on where you are in the city, with morning temperatures staying around the 7 degrees before we climb to about 23 later in the day. Across the south, the Pembina Valley region from Morden towards Port La Prairie, we're seeing 8 degrees there. Brandon, we're at 4. Dauphin is at 5 and Gimli is at 2 degrees. Parkland region, you'll see your highs around 26, while up north, we're looking at between -3 to 5 degrees with highs around 9 degrees. And of course, we're looking at 15 around the Lean Lake area. So it's more like a bright, dry day in the city today. We're going to see a high of 23, current temperature 7 at the Forks.
All right, let's get into the morning commute. Corey, what's going on out there?
Very quiet commute overall out there. Haven't heard of any major issues, but if you do see something going on, if you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Time for our medical column. As you know, if you're a regular listener, Dr. Raj Bardwaj comes and joins us with a different topic every Wednesday morning. Today he's talking about electronic records, which is something that we've been looking for in this province for a long time when it comes to our health care. 95% of Canadian physicians are now using digital records, but only 47% of Canadians have ever accessed their own health information electronically. Now, this comes from a recently published report in the Canadian Medical Association Journal. And as Canada overall looks to modernize record keeping and information sharing, doctors and patients are watching closely. Dr. Bardwaj is here with our medical column.
Good morning, Marcy.
So I mentioned the stats out of the report. What caught your eye in this?
Yeah, those stats really caught my eye, actually. But, I think there's a few other things. The report points out that if we don't proceed in a coordinated way, we might end up building a bunch of different electronic health systems that don't really talk to each other. And that's not necessarily a helpful thing either. So, for example, working in a hospital, I might be able to see your records from previous admissions to the hospital and hopefully from, other hospitals in the province. But if the records don't, if that system can't talk to the system that your family doctor uses or your specialist uses, then I can't see any of the records from the family doctor's visits, right? And that happens a lot, unfortunately, across the country. So ideally, we need to have systems that can talk to each other. Now, if you zoom out, you'll find that even the best integrated electronic health record systems across the country don't talk across provincial boundaries. So if you get emergency surgery because you broke your leg skiing in BC, your doctor at home can't see those records, can't look at your x-rays, can't look at your blood tests. So electronic health records, they've got a ton of potential, but it's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of time, and unfortunately a lot of money to achieve a really integrated network.
Let's look at the money. How exactly does giving doctors and patients access to health records electronically save the system money?
Yeah, so imagine accessing information in a non-digital way. Let's say you need some information sent from your family doctor's office to your specialist's office. If it's not digitized, right, it's literally somebody going through a file folder, picking out the paper that has the information on it and faxing it from one office to the other, and then hopefully picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, did you get my fax? Did you get it?" So just imagine the time and effort and money spent just in staffing that costs, right? And then it's a lot of times people, the specialist office might say, "Forget it, I'm tired of waiting. We're just going to repeat the tests. We're going to repeat the blood work or the imaging or whatever." And that costs time and money and effort and stuff as well, right? And this is a big problem. The authors say that the problem of disconnected data costs taxpayers more than $9.4 billion each year. And if it's time-sensitive information that we're needing to share, that costs more than just money, right? It can cost health and lives.
When it comes to actually delivering healthcare and improving people's health outcomes, how much does digital record keeping help?
Yeah, so on the healthcare provider side, right, the shared electronic health records, it helps, like I said, with reducing duplication of tests, but it also really helps with coordinating care, right? If you've got a diabetes doctor and an orthopedic surgeon working together, they can do a lot more efficient care than if they don't know what each other is doing. Plus your family doc, hopefully coordinating all of that. On the patient side, I think this is really important. I mean, people can act as their own safety check and spot inaccuracies. Let's say, oh, I looked at my list of medications. I'm not on that anymore, or I didn't know I was supposed to still take that. My meds ran out a while ago. And the other big thing for me, which I really don't like as both a doctor and a patient, I really don't like this idea of we're going to do some tests on you. If they're normal, we're not going to call you. That's a risky communication strategy at best. Right. But it's a necessary evil, though, I think, because of the huge costs that we would incur if we tried to call everyone just to tell them all their tests were fine. But the way we're doing it, results slip through the cracks, and that leads to, poor health outcomes. But when people can access their own health records, I think that risk is reduced considerably.
Is there a downside, though, to that? Because if people get their test results, they may not understand or maybe not be able to interpret them by themselves?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, right? If people do understand the information that they're accessing, then this is a great way to empower them to, be more engaged, to be more informed in their own healthcare. But if they don't understand the information as presented, and let me tell you, it can sometimes be presented in a very confusing way. It can make for a lot of unnecessary concern. So that like to the point where we get people in the urgent care all the time saying, I got this notification on my app saying that, this one blood test was out of range. And so I came into the urgent care because I don't know if is this important? Like, do I need to take care of this tonight? So that information without understanding is not necessarily useful. But now this might be a limited problem as we, drop into the age of AI where people, pop their health records into some AI agent and ask it to explain the results of the blood work or their CT or report or whatever. But that can also lead to more disparity, right, between people who are comfortable with that sort of technology and privacy risk versus people who aren't. And I will tell you another scenario that I've seen in the urgent care is people finding out that they have cancer because of a notification on their health records app rather than a face-to-face conversation with their doctor. So they come into the urgent care saying, my app tells me I have cancer. Now what? Right? And
that must be terrible.
It's terrible for everybody. But the flip side is it's also terrible having to wait for results until your doctor's office calls you.
Yeah, it is.
Right. So some people would prefer to have any information as soon as possible. Other people might want the info, shared in person by their doctor with the explanations to go with it, even if that takes a little longer.
Tricky. All right, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
My pleasure.
That is our medical column at 7:43 a.m. with Dr. Raj Bardwaj. Well, it doesn't take much for us to recognize the music of the Tragically Hip. We're playing it this morning because this is a brand new release from the Hip today. It's 6 o'clock this morning, 2 new tunes coming out. Members of the band have put them out. These are the live recordings ahead of the full album coming out in August from the Hip's final tour. They called it a national celebration. You might have watched Man, Machine, Poem, lead singer Gord Downey's final tour before his death a year later. This is Locked in the Trunk of a Car from the final night.
All I am, I found armor in my belly from the 16th century. Conquistador, I think. They don't know how old I am. They found armor in my belly. Passion out a machine. Tension, lashing out a machine, having tension, rushing by the machine, having tension.
We're listening to new music from The Hip. This is a newly released recording. This is live, recorded in their last performance in Kingston, Ontario, summer of 2016, 10 years ago already. Locked in the trunk of a car. It was just released this morning, as I mentioned. So a full album of this concert's coming out in August, and CBC, after the 10-year anniversary, is going to re-air The Hip's final full concert 10 years later. So you can check that out in August. As I mentioned, there's 2 tracks that were released this morning, so later today, surely the other one's going to find its way to your radio. Right now, it is 12 minutes to 8 o'clock on 89.3. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We had a traffic update here for you on this sunny Wednesday. Justin called the commuter line. There is a collision. This is Sherbrooke and Notre Dame. He says it's blocking the entirety of the southbound Sherbrooke right now. So there's no emergency vehicles yet on scene, so be careful around that area and maybe avoid it if you can. 788-3093, that is Sherbrooke and Notre Dame. Thanks for calling. Julian, calling the traffic line. Mainly sunny right now. As I mentioned, it's 7 degrees. Our high is 23. Well, next on the show, let's turn our attention to a story you might have heard in the news this morning. And what a story it is. It's about Shelley Schultz's brother. Shelley waited more than 2 years to learn how her 54-year-old brother Sean died. Sean lived with an intellectual disability. He was mostly nonverbal. In December 2023, Shelley found Sean at his group home in Gimli, significantly malnourished, emaciated, and dying. She thought his group home had neglected him, but earlier this year, she got a copy of his autopsy and the internal investigation into his death. She learned that the home tried to help Sean, taking him to the hospital multiple times because he wasn't eating, but he kept getting sent back. Now, she says a judicial inquest is the only way to make sure that this doesn't happen to somebody else. Kristen Annabelle is a reporter with CBC Manitoba's I-Team and is in studio with more details. Good morning.
Good morning.
What a story. Tell us about Shelley. I mean, I can't even imagine this moment when she first saw her brother. She flew home, I understand, to Manitoba in 2023?
Yeah, so Shelley lived in BC. She had moved there about 6 years ago, and she got a message from her father in December of 2023, and he said Sean was very ill, so she flew there with her son Damon to visit him. And when she got to the care home, the group home where Sean lived, they warned her that she was going to be shocked by what she saw. But when she got there, she wasn't ready for it.
Oh, it's terrifying. Have you ever seen somebody who starved? Like actually seen them and touched them? He was pure bones. His legs just jutted out at the knees. Pictures you've seen of people that are dying of anorexia. I've
And it was so shocking for her because this wasn't the Sean that her and her son Damon remembered. Shelley and Sean talked to us about her brother Sean. Shelley and Damon talked to us about Sean, and they said he was this goofy guy. He loved the band Def Leppard. He loved cheeseburgers and Coke and the movie Wayne's World. And here's Damon talking to us about his uncle.
And he was just always smiling. Like you see him, even when he was in a bad mood, he would flip it like a switch if the people he liked were around.
So what happened after Shelley found Sean like that?
So she phoned her dad, who was Sean's substitute decision maker, and her dad was 82 years old at the time, and he lived in Winnipeg, and he couldn't visit Sean regularly. So what he really did was he relied on the group home staff or doctors to update him on Sean's condition. And what Shelley said to me is that she just felt her dad wasn't fully aware of how critical things had gotten with Sean and that he just wasn't in the mental headspace to deal with his illness after his wife had died a few years back. So they decided that Sean needed to go to the hospital. He was eventually transferred to HSC, put on palliative care, and then he died just over a month later in January 2024. And she said she was very thankful that she got to be with him when he passed.
I actually appreciated that I was alone with him and got to say goodbye. That I was sorry that this happened. It shouldn't have happened.
This did happen 2 years ago now. Why did it take so long for her to learn actually, the details as I outlined in the introduction here, like what happened?
So because of staffing issues at the chief medical examiner's office, Shelley didn't get Sean's autopsy until a few months ago. And that's when she learned that Sean died of sepsis, but the contributing cause was malnutrition. And Sean had been living in Community Bridges group home for decades. Her family even helped create it so that Sean would have 24-hour care for his entire life. So after we requested an interview with Nahanni Fontaine, that's the family's minister, Shelley was given access to the internal investigation into his death. And Shelley told the province that she wouldn't share the report, but we were able to view it and we did make notes. And what Shelley learned was that the workers at Sean's home were really trying to help him, that he had been sick for a number of months and he wasn't eating. So, they got him a dietitian, they got him an occupational therapist, they took him to the Gimli Hospital multiple times. And the report even states that the group staff were frustrated by the lack of support that they were getting from the Gimli Hospital. And Sean kept getting sent back. He was significantly losing weight. And the report was critical of the lack of follow-up from the doctors about Sean's condition. It also felt, though, that the hospital might not have known what to do because Shelley's father was resistant to any invasive procedures like a colonoscopy because they knew that Sean would not do well with that kind of procedure.
After reading the report, it's become much more apparent that there was a lot of staff at the residence who knew that something needed to happen. And I think it's almost even more shocking that a lot of people were reaching out for help and none was given.
Why does Shelley believe that an inquest is needed?
So an inquest is called by the chief medical examiner, and it examines the facts surrounding a death. Witnesses are called, and a judge will make recommendations that could prevent a similar death from occurring. Now, Shelley will never know why Sean stopped eating, but she does see an inquest as a way to make sure that somebody doesn't suffer the way that Sean did. And this report just looked at the home and whether Sean was neglected. And it ultimately found that Sean was not neglected at the home he lived in, but it pointed to a whole host of systemic issues about how we treat people with intellectual disabilities in the medical system. So what Shelley thinks is that an inquest could look at these issues. How could have the hospital better worked with the group home? How could have doctors better worked with Sean's dad about Sean's situation? How do we make sure someone with an intellectual disability has timely access to medical care? So we spoke to Yana Lunsky. She's a program director at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto. And she just said it can be so hard for people with intellectual disabilities to communicate what's going on with their own health.
They're really not able to communicate that there's actually something wrong, right? Or the way they're communicating that something's wrong is not understood by the provider. And so they think that that means it's not a problem and they sort of go to the next bed.
What response have you had or what have you heard from the government about this then?
Family's Minister Nahanni Fontaine wasn't made available for an interview. In a statement, she did give her condolences to the family. And she said that, following this information, she is working with her department to make sure that families have better communication and better access to these types of investigations moving forward. Now, the Interlake Eastern Health Authority said they can't comment on Sean's care at Gimli Hospital, but it wasn't deemed a critical incident. So for Shelley, what she wants is for the healthcare system, for government, for group homes to really start thinking about what happens to people with disabilities as they get older and they start having more complex medical needs.
Residences have been around in this form for probably the right amount of time for a lot of people to be aging out of that form of care now. So what is happening to them? Because this stuff started 80s is when we started working with this kind of way of integrating living. So those people are now becoming Sean's age. And so what's happening to them? What is the plan?
Thank you for bringing in this story this morning. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That is Kristen Annable, reporter with CBC Manitoba's I-Team. Now, this story, as you know, is only one that the I-Team is bringing us this morning, but they're frequently on the program. And I'd like to remind you that you can reach them if you want. If you have a tip for the I-Team, you can call their confidential line. It's 204-788-3744. You can email them, the letter iteam@cbc.ca. And they'll have more on Sean's story tonight as well on CBC News at 6. If you want to read more, and that's easier for you if you're already out and about and on your device, cbc.ca/Manitoba. It's 3 minutes to 8 o'clock now on 89.3. It's 7 degrees in Winnipeg. It's mainly sunny. Our high today, 23. Sunshine all day and light wind. So today's going to be the beauty of the week. Clear though still tonight, a little bit windy. Overnight we are expecting a low of 13 and then tomorrow a high of 21. Although tomorrow we do have a 60% chance we're going to see some late morning showers. We did have a problem with traffic earlier. Julian calling the commuter line at collision Sherbrooke and Notre Dame that had been blocking the entirety of the southbound Sherbrooke. And if you see anything to update that situation or anything new, please call us at 788-3093 and let us know how that Wednesday morning commute's going, or what it's like within the city or in your community, whatever city you're in. Maybe you're in Thompson or Steinbach or Brandon, wherever you are in Manitoba. We'll pass it along here. Coming up to national and international news. After 8 o'clock, though, we return to local programming. If you were with us yesterday, you heard about some challenges in the west end of Winnipeg. Today, we're going to talk to the superintendent of the Winnipeg School Division about how students are being affected by heightened open drug use near schools in that area, and what the division is doing to address some of the safety concerns that have been raised. Right now, though, with updates on other stories, here's Heather Wells.
A woman in Ile-des-Chênes has started a petition against a potential AI data center in her community. Jet AI and Consensus Corp propose building a center across the road from Christy Little's house. She worries about potential light, noise, and air pollution. Now, a Saskatchewan man has some advice for people in Ile-des-Chênes who are opposed to the construction of that AI data center. JJ Big Sky in Regina protested the development of the Bell AI data center there. We're going to hear his experience coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
As I mentioned, World Report's up next. Stay with us. It's 1 minute to 8 o'clock.
On cue. Before CSI, before Bones, there was no such thing as like a forensic anthropologist lab coat TV hero. Kathy Reichs changed all that. She's the real-life scientist who wrote 24 best-selling novels and basically created a genre.
We were just nerds working in our labs for years and nobody paid any attention to us.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It is 26,000 kilometers from the southern tip of Argentina to Alaska, and Quebec's Olivia Caz is traveling it on horseback. She started it last year, thinks she might be on the road for at least half a decade. What you see in slow travel, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Martina Fitzgerald. U.S. President Donald Trump is in Beijing for his much-anticipated state visit to China. After Air Force One touchdown, Trump was greeted by China's vice president and hundreds of flag-waving youth. He was supposed to make the trip earlier, but was forced to postpone because of the war in Iran. That war is likely to be high on the agenda as the leaders meet, but it's just one of many issues. The CBC's Willie Lowry is in our Washington bureau. Willie, what are some of the key outcomes Trump will be looking for at this summit?
Martina, China is unquestionably America's biggest rival on the international stage, and relations have been tense. This visit is part of a reset by the Trump administration. President Donald Trump has spoken glowingly of his Chinese counterpart, Xi Jinping.
He's been a friend of mine. He's been somebody that we get along with, and I think you're going to see that good things are going to happen. This is going to be a very exciting trip. A lot of good things are going to happen.
Trump's mission over the coming days has been scaled back somewhat because of the Iran war, which is likely to be a major talking point between the two leaders. But Trump will try to focus on trade and technology. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has really spearheaded this trip instead of Secretary of State Marco Rubio, as is normally customary, a reflection of how economically oriented this trip is likely to be. Trump says he will raise the issue of Jimmy Lai. He's that pro-democracy media tycoon currently serving a 20-year sentence under Hong Kong's tough security laws.
Okay, so that covers the U.S. side of things. What about China? What does she want to get out of this?
So she is expected to press the U.S. on Taiwan. Washington currently does not support independence, but she is hoping to get the Trump administration to say it opposes it. On technology, Beijing is hoping to get the U.S. to ease restrictions around the sale of AI chips and semiconductors, which it needs to drive its economic, military, and technological ambitions.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. Thanks, Willie.
My pleasure.
BC's Supreme Court will deliver its verdict today in the trial of a former RCMP officer accused of colluding with China. William Miker is accused of taking part in a global Chinese plan to bully wanted expats into returning home. As Georgie Smythe reports, Miker maintains he's innocent.
Really don't want to comment too much while things are still underway, but I'm anxious to get home to my family.
William Miker pleaded not guilty to one count of engaging in preparatory acts to commit an offence under Canada's Security of Information Act. The former RCMP officer, who once specialised in financial crimes, denies allegations he was working for the Chinese government to prepare a campaign of intimidation against a multimillionaire Chinese expat who lives in BC. A man China says fled the country with hundreds of millions of dollars. To prove their case, Crown prosecutors used an email Miker sent to a colleague in 2017, where he talked about a, quote, fraudster wanted by Chinese police. Crown lawyers argued it was clear Miker was referring to a Chinese national in BC and were expected to call a key witness to prove that argument. But instead, they shocked the courtroom in closing their case without him. The prosecution says it's presented a range of facts that Miker was laying the groundwork for a campaign of extortion, one that was an affront to Canadian sovereignty.
I think I'm a pretty straight, honest guy.
On the final day of the judge-only trial, Miker's counsel told the court the Crown's case is purely circumstantial, based mostly on a narrow reading of 2 paragraphs from that email, and that criminal intent had not been proven. A verdict is expected today. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
CNN is reporting the Central Intelligence Agency is carrying out operations against cartel members in Mexico. It says since last year, CIA operatives have been involved in everything from intelligence sharing to assassination operations inside Mexico's borders. A CIA spokesperson calls the reporting false and salacious and says it puts American lives at risk. The Mexican government is also denying the reports. Sea-Watch says the Libyan Coast Guard has opened fire on members of its aid organization. It says shots were fired when humanitarian workers were rescuing people from an overcrowded boat in the Mediterranean Sea. As Megan Williams tells us, the NGO says this is part of a growing pattern of violence by Libyan maritime forces, and it's funded by Europe.
The Sea-Watch 5 had just rescued about 90 people from a sinking boat in international waters north of Libya on Monday. Sea-Watch says Libyan patrol boats then began pursuing the ship with the rescued people and about 30 crew members on board.
They wanted to abduct a vessel and demanded that we follow them to Libya.
Sea-Watch spokesperson Julia Messner says the crew sent 2 Mayday calls that were ignored by the Central Maritime Coordination Office in Rome. Messner says Libyan boats are tied to militias that intercept migrants at sea and return them to abuse on land.
They are actively bringing people into a cycle of violence where people have to pay ransoms, family are called while their loved ones are tortured and are threatened to pay ransoms. Then when these ransoms are paid, put people on a boat, and then again at sea they intercept them to bring them back.
Human rights groups have been documenting abuse, extortion, and torture in Libya for years. But European governments continue to fund, train, and equip Libyan maritime forces as part of their effort to stop migrant boats from reaching Europe. The EU says its training has helped reduce violent incidents at sea. Sea-Watch and other rescue groups dispute that. They say Europe is outsourcing border control to armed groups that put both migrants and rescuers in danger. Megan Williams, CBC News, Rome.
Keir Starmer is still clinging to the job as British Prime Minister and leader of the Labour Party for now. In Parliament this morning, King Charles delivered a speech laying out the Starmer government's priorities, including long-promised changes to education, health, and the courts. But it appears that may not be enough to satisfy critics. Starmer's health minister, Wes Streeting, is rumoured to be launching a leadership challenge as early as tomorrow. Australia's government is trying to make it easier for young people to buy a home. Real estate there is among the most expensive in the world. So the government is scaling back tax breaks for property investors. Australia's Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, says it could help 75,000 primarily younger people enter the housing market.
The status quo is busted in the housing market and in the tax system, and where those two things intersect creates a level of intergenerational inequity that we're not prepared to tolerate.
The move is controversial. Just before last year's election, the Labor government had promised not to make changes to its tax policy for investors. But electoral power in Australia is shifting to younger generations. One of the largest coffee chains in the United States is coming back to Canada. In the years to come, there are plans for hundreds of Dunkin Donuts locations to open here. But as business reporter Anis Hedgari reports, the brand previously struggled in Canada.
I absolutely cannot wait.
Flight attendant Jay Antflick loves Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee. He buys it whenever he flies to the U.S.
Usually 2 to 3 a day.
2 to 3 a day?
Oh, yeah. That's how I run on coffee.
He won't have to run far by the end of the year. Foodtastic, the Montreal company behind Second Cup, says it's bringing Dunkin' Donuts to Canada.
And all our franchisees are going to be local Canadian franchisees.
Peter Mammis is the president of Foodtastic. He says he sees opportunity even in a softer economy.
The quick service restaurants are having a little bit of a lull. But I think that's actually a benefit to us bringing Dunkin' in now because there's going to be a lot more real estate available to us.
In the 2010s, the last few Dunkin' franchises in Canada folded under other ownership, in part blaming a lack of investment to fight Tim Hortons. University of Toronto marketing professor David Soberman says Tim's is still a big competitor.
And they have somewhere around 4,000 outlets, so even if Dunkin' opens a couple of hundred outlets, it's still very small compared to Tim Hortons.
Is there room for more brands to enter into the Canadian market? I think so.
Robert Carter is with the Coffee Association of Canada. Its members include both Tim Hortons and the new operators of Dunkin'.
Canadians are amongst the highest in terms of coffee consumption. It's not surprising that brands such as, Dunkin's are looking at Canada as that natural extension.
The first outlets are planned for Toronto and Montreal, so while the slogan says America runs on Dunkin', most of Canada will have to wait. Anis Hedgari, CBC News, Calgary.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Martina Fitzgerald. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for being with us this morning, or for staying with us if you got up early and you've been listening for a while. You are with The Morning Show on 89.3 FM on CBC. And it is a beautiful morning, actually, across most of Manitoba today. It's going to be a lovely day. We have been at 7 degrees. We'll update that in a moment, but the sun's been up all morning. It's going to stay with us. Abby's got your forecast. We also are going to be talking more about a story that we brought you yesterday. So we're going to hear from the superintendent of the Winnipeg School Division about how students are being affected by heightened open drug use near their schools and what the division's doing to address some of the safety concerns. So we're going to look at that because yesterday, Gordon Bell High School specifically was raised by Area Councillor Cindy Gilroy here in Winnipeg, expressing some of the concerns in her ward and in her area, especially with open drug use around Portage and Sherbrooke, as social conditions and problems in our city with homelessness continue. So where do we go from here? But the focus of the interview is how can students be protected? What do you do when these populations are mixing? We'll have that discussion with the superintendent. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells. She has details on some other stories this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a family wants answers after a disabled man living in a group home died malnourished in hospital. 54-year-old Sean Felstad weighed only 92 pounds when he died in 2024. He died a month after his sister saw him at the Gimli group home. Shelley Schultz says his appearance was an absolute shock, and now his family's calling for an inquest. 5 workers at Winnipeg's largest private health clinic are set to walk off the job next Tuesday. Cardiology techs at the Manitoba Clinic issued strike notice yesterday. Their union, the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals, says Well Health has proposed wages on average 27% lower than the public sector. The union president says that is unacceptable. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Abby, the hot spot right now is McCreary.
McCreary, yes, Mercy.
It's 16.
Yes, most of the regions are actually really recovering after this past few days of really below seasonal temperatures. But now we're in for this stunning spring day. Widespread sunshine taking hold, bringing warm temperatures across board for the Red River Valley region in the city here. Sunny skies waking us up already. We are currently at 10 degrees both at the Forks and at the airport. Really beautiful outside. We're heading for a beautiful high of 23 later, though it will get windy at some point in the afternoon as the winds picks up from the south. So take that into consideration. While across board, we're going to see most regions in the south warm up from 25 to 27. Up north, we're seeing temperatures between -7 and 7 degrees right now with mainly sunny skies. But Winnipeg, it's 10 degrees. We get to 23, but I see 24 if the sun stays this warm for a longer period, maybe after 6 o'clock.
I'm into it, brother. I love it. We've been waiting. Poor Abby and Riley Leitchuk have been getting the stink eye from everybody in the whole province, including in the newsroom, because it's been just not that nice. And now we can celebrate the message and the messengers.
Now I like Abby again.
I know. Remember when we weren't into him so much?
No.
Corey Funk, traffic.
Yes, a couple things to keep an eye out for. Notre Dame and Sherbrooke. So there's been a multi-vehicle collision there. Emergency crews are on scene, and they are blocking the southbound lanes on Sherbrooke and the northbound median lane. So all of southbound Sherbrooke blocked. Northbound median lane blocked. Westbound Notre Dame, the curb and middle lanes are blocked. So if you're heading southbound Sherbrooke, you want to find another way to get where you need to go. Also, King Edward and Wellington, there's a multi-vehicle collision. Also, emergency vehicles on scene. They're blocking all the eastbound lanes, and the southbound east curb lane is also blocked. So look out for that. You want to maybe avoid that area as well. If you do see anything else going on out there, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, as I mentioned, City Councillor Cindy Gilroy is concerned about open drug use in the West End, particularly near Portage and Sherbrooke, as she shared with us on the show yesterday. She talked about how it's impacting young people who go to school in the area. Here's some of what she said.
And, Gordon Bell School is right there. And many of these children have to walk by the open drug use or violence that is occurring. So it's definitely a huge concern in the community.
To talk about how this is being addressed, the superintendent of the Winnipeg School Division, Matt Henderson, is here. Good morning.
Good morning.
How much have you heard about this, either around Gordon Bell or around other schools in Winnipeg in this West End area? Is this a concern from your superintendent point of view?
It's a concern throughout the whole city and the whole division around addictions, around homelessness, and the impact that it's having on our schools in general. I mean, I live right by Gordon Bell, and so I'm part of the community, and I see it every single day. I'm at schools every day. There is a significant issue with drug dealing and drug use, and it's impacting our school and school communities. By way of example, on one street yesterday, I had 3 hold and secures because of one incident. So 3 of my schools were in hold and secure because of an incident outside. Everybody's safe inside. But it is a significant issue.
So can you describe what that means, a hold and secure, and what kind of what a nature of a kind of an incident might be as an example that would cause that to happen?
Sure. I mean, it could be a number of things, but a hold and secure is when we just make sure all the doors are locked, and they generally are in all of our schools. But it could be anything from there's somebody outside who's really having a difficult time to the Winnipeg Police Service doing a raid of a particular house. It could be a number of things. I mean, we've had principals who have had to resuscitate people on playgrounds It is the fueling of drugs in our community, which is having a significant impact. And I appreciate Councillor Gilroy coming on and speaking about it and raising it. I think school divisions, we're doing all we can to support our schools and our communities. For instance, at Gordon Bell, we have a partnership with West End Biz, where we have their patrols coming. Where next year we have 2 community safety hosts from Zucchini Ode who are going to be joining the Gordon Bell staff to help people in the community. And more school divisions are taking on more and more of the yoke of keeping our community together.
How much detail can you provide us about which 3 schools were in lockdown and what happened yesterday?
I don't particularly want to go into that right now. But just to say, it's not an unusual thing.
Okay. Can you tell us if they were in the West End? Just as a last question on that.
Yeah, it was in the West End.
Okay.
But I would say just quickly, Marcy, like the drug use and addiction, and I'm not blaming people at all. That's not what I'm trying to do, but it's pervasive throughout the city and the whole division. It doesn't matter the neighborhood.
So it's interesting because Cindy Gilroy was talking about, like looking for short-term solutions, like maybe closing bus shelters in the area. So maybe there'll be fewer loitering, or maybe people won't camp out or gather. But she also acknowledged that for her, around the social problems and the drug use, she feels the city has done more to look at and address, in the province, homelessness with the strategies, but the actual drug use that happens and the underlying problems that people are struggling with, those things aren't getting enough support. I wonder whether or not you have a thought on that.
Many thoughts on that. I think, I'm not I would never, everyone is trying to bring solutions to the table. So I'm not trying to suggest that anybody's one solution is worse or better. This is a wicked problem. But I think, getting rid of bus shelters is not the solution when we're dealing with the fact that we have organized crime and drug dealers on corners selling drugs to people who are really vulnerable. The solution to me is get rid of the drugs and get rid of the drug dealers. And I know that's a really complex thing to think about, but when I think about the parking lot across from Gordon Bell where the Tim Hortons and Rexall are, and just other corners in like drug dealers are there. They're pervasive and they're willing and able. They're excellent entrepreneurs. And in Winnipeg School Division, when there's a new shipment of $5 syringes in the community, we feel it. And if we're not really ready to talk about getting rid of drug dealers, then we can put Band-Aids on other things and keep doing that. But we got to get rid of the drugs, and we have to get rid of the gangs, and we have to get rid of the drug dealers.
Is it something, Superintendent, that students talk about or raise concerns about in terms of how safe that they feel? Obviously, you've talked about a response, but I wonder what students are saying or their teachers, or if they're not saying it, what their teachers are telling you about what they're saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, as a with my principals, I've got 150 principals and vice principals, and we talk about this all the time. We have kids stepping over people, and like that's hugely problematic for a million reasons. One is that we have vulnerable people who have lost their dignity, but also it does at times it does present safety issues for our kids and our staff, and our staff are phenomenal about supporting people in the community because the community is us. And we have critical partnerships with Bear Clan and with Dunkin Donuts and with countless other organizations where we're in constant communication to support the community. I mean, one of the things that I find really frustrating is in the mail yesterday I got something from the city of Winnipeg saying, hey, school taxes are going up, but the city of Winnipeg municipality has the lowest taxes. And then we see the city crumbling. And I think we need a little bit more of a direct partnership with all levels of government instead of sort of saying, hey, we have lower taxes, but because of that, we're going to offload services to school divisions. And I think that's irresponsible. I think we need people at the table who are really looking at solutions like getting drugs off the streets and getting drug dealers off the streets.
In terms of how this problem has changed or progressed, if you think about all of the schools, as you've said, but in the West End specifically as well, how this has changed or escalated these problems outside of schools and I guess just the city by extension. Is it your sense that there's been a shift since COVID? Or are we talking the last year for some reason things are escalating as far as drug use and social problems, being seen more out on the streets and outside schools?
Well, I mean, look, you work at the CBC.
I do.
And so we're neighbors, and I live in the community. I think we've seen the gap between rich and poor in Winnipeg widen, but also the impact of methamphetamine and fentanyl has just obliterated the city. And there are beautiful things happening all the time, magical things happening in the city of Winnipeg. I love this city. It's my city. I'll be here forever and ever and ever. But until we're really wanting to tackle organized crime, where people are walking around with big trucks and wads of money and houses and all that kind of stuff and preying on vulnerable people, until we're really seriously wanting to come to the table to talk about that, I don't know what else we can do other than just simply putting Band-Aids on sort of some of these issues.
Is this the worst you've seen it?
This is the worst I've seen it in my time in Winnipeg, and it's because of the methamphetamine and fentanyl, and we can go through all the reasons why people are addicted and the mental health issues and all that kind of stuff. But if we eliminate the source, there are people in our community deliberately trying to harm people so that they can make money, and so let's say that 3 times out loud, and those people need to be removed. And not be able to sell drugs to vulnerable people.
Matt Henderson, thank you for your time this morning.
Appreciate it.
That's Matt Henderson, Superintendent of the Winnipeg School Division, in that interview discussing what they've done around Gordon Bell to try to help deal with an area concern. But he is talking about this as a citywide concern in the schools that he oversees in Winnipeg. If you want to weigh in, if you're a principal, a superintendent of another division, if you echo the call or you have a different perspective, we'd love to hear from you. 788-3205.
The puck may have dropped on the playoffs, but the news doesn't stop for hockey. I'm Brittany Greenslade, host of CBC Winnipeg News at 6. To get your local news, stream CBC Winnipeg News at 6, 24/7 on CBC Gem, the CBC News app, and selected streaming platforms. CBC Winnipeg News at 6, your local news on your favorite streaming device.
8:24 a.m. the time right now, 10 degrees in Winnipeg. It's mainly sunny as we head for 23. Well, we have music from a Winnipeg-based Moroccan-Canadian songwriter and artist. There's a new track from the album of the same name as the artist. This is Ayazak, and pardon me, that's the name of the album. But this is Black Cinnamon.
Sweet black cinnamon, sugar and spice. 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 Nobody believed me when I said I saw an angel. She was walking past me, writing secrets in a journal. For as long as I remember, she smelled like cinnamon with a little spice. I barely knew her name, but I remember she was cold as ice. Sweet black cinnamon, sugar and spice. 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 Nobody believed me in my love triangle. It was me, her, and mine. Sweet black cinnamon, sugar and spice. I have never seen any woman like that. I have never been to Amsterdam, and the way she moves around the room got me feeling so confused. This must be paradise. Sweet black cinnamon, sugar and spice. 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 Black cinnamon, black cinnamon, black cinnamon, black cinnamon, black cinnamon,
Well, I completely turfed the intro to that tune, but what a fun tune that was. It was called Black Cinnamon, and that is the name of the album, and the artist is Winnipeg-based Moroccan-Canadian songwriter Ayazak, which I did get right, but that was fun. Loved it. 8:27 a.m. is the time right now, and it is Wednesday, May the 13th. Now, today is actually a bit of a tough anniversary for some people in Manitoba. We were looking back, Corey and I, at a year ago today.
Yes, a year ago today is we got a call about someone reminding us that a year ago today is when the people started getting evacuated in Lac du Bonnet because of the fires. It happened fast, right? And I remember that morning talking with the Reeve at the time, and just how quickly things changed. They had to keep extending that evacuation order. 1,000 people had to go, and it just happened like that.
Yeah. The listener that called the listener line was just, obviously it was on their mind. I'm not sure if they told us, were they from that area or is just
he
on
said
there?
he's from Lac du Bonnet.
Yeah. I suspect there's going to be a lot of people. That was the only loss of life in the province after all the evacuations that happened. A couple from Lac du Bonnet, which happened later in what developed there.
Yep.
Yeah, a year ago. Wow.
Yep. Lots of destruction of property as well. It's awful.
Absolutely. So we are heading into a time when I think there's going to be a little bit of nervousness this year after last year in wildfires. Also about watching what happened in Alberta yesterday with the first wildfire of their season and people leaving very quickly with the fire on either side of the highway.
And if you're wondering, I checked the fire view map right now, and there's only one fire that's ongoing in the province, which is considered under control.
Okay.
So that's all it's going compared to last year this time. Yeah, much different story.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
8:28 is the time right now. We have to check what's happening on Radio Noon's call-in because we're coming up to 8:30 and Marjorie Dalhouse has popped in. Hi, what are you going to be asking today?
Well, we were going to be asking people about how old were you when you moved out? That's because recently Stats Canada put out some numbers saying that millennials are living at home longer and putting off buying property. So we want to hear from you. Do you have someone living at home with you? Why are you choosing to stay at home? How old were you when you moved out? Maybe you have some advice for someone who has decided that they're going to buy their first property and move out for the first time. So give us a call, text us, coming up at 12:15 on Radio Noon today.
I'm also really curious about whether or not there's going to be some cultural angles in there because it's viewed very different. Like in our family, like there was it wasn't that infrequent to have families that had multi-generation under one household and it's interesting because some people are like, oh yeah, my mom wanted me out right away to learn independence. And I'm like, my mom would have been happy if I stayed at home. She'd be happy if me and my husband live with her now.
Like my mom would be happy too if I lived with her right now.
Yeah. She cried mightily when I moved out. Corey has a totally different situation.
I literally just moved back in with
my your mic's off.
Oh wait, there we go.
Okay,
I literally just moved back in with my parents. We bought a duplex together. So
yeah, multi-generational the different way now with your kids and
exactly.
But how old were you when you moved out? That's an interesting question.
19.
19. I think I was 22 because I went to university then college. And you, Marge?
I was 22 as well.
Yeah. The call-in today going to be interesting between 12:30 and 1 right here on Radio Noon. Right now it's time from your CBC Manitoba News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg on a glorious Wednesday in Winnipeg. Lots of sunshine, just a light southerly breeze this morning. It'll get a little stronger this afternoon and we warm up. 23 is our high in Winnipeg today. The family of an intellectually disabled care home resident is calling for an inquest. Sean Felstead lived in 24/7 care in Gimli. He died in January of 2024 from sepsis after becoming malnourished. Psychologist Yona Lunsky is director at the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health in Toronto.
There are many stories like this that happen and people are quiet and in pain, and we have to look at what we can learn and we have to do better.
Lunsky says conditions like sepsis and even constipation are more likely to kill people with intellectual disabilities. Falling through the cracks in the medical system is part of the reason why. And she says healthcare providers need more training to meet their needs. A Saskatchewan man has some advice for people in Ile-des-Chênes opposed to the construction of an AI data center. JJ Big Sky lives in Regina. He protested the development of a Bell AI data center there. Despite a petition with close to 13,000 signatures, construction has already begun in Regina. In Ile-des-Chênes, more than 10,000 people have signed a petition opposing a plan to build a large data center near the town. But Big Sky says online petitions aren't enough.
It shows the amount of people that are within your cause. That being said, online petitions can only go so far. There needs to be collective action. Physical petitions are ones that cannot be ignored. Online ones can be ignored.
Jet AI and Consensus Core propose to build the center near Ile-des-Chênes. The RM of Richot says it is seeking more information from the company. A healthcare union says Winnipeg's largest private clinic is prioritizing profits over patient care. 5 cardiology techs at the Manitoba Clinic have issued a strike notice. They are set to walk off the job next Tuesday. The techs are represented by the Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals. It says the clinic proposed wages, on average, 27% lower than in the public sector. Jason Linklater is president of the union.
I don't know how, on one hand, you sell that you're profiting millions of dollars, and on the other hand, saying that we're going to have to close if we give these people an increase that represents like 0.0015 of profits.
The owner of the clinic, Well Health, says it won't comment on negotiations. It says patient continuity plans are in place if needed. The Manitoba Teachers Society is confident in the province's choice for a new commissioner of teacher professional misconduct. The government named veteran child safety advocate Noni Clausen to that post. Teacher Society President Lillian Clausen met with the education minister last week, sharing her priorities for that new commissioner. She says Clausen has worked in kindergarten to grade 12 system, is well versed in trauma-informed healing, and is bilingual. Clausen hopes she will keep an open mind.
She was a person who was always looking out for the underdog in the situation. And so we just want somebody coming in who's objective and maybe considering that the underdog might not always be on the opposite end of who the teacher is. And so there's lots of different experiences.
Clausen says the union is open to systemic changes in the way teachers are investigated if they are included in the discussion. The former Vulcan Ironworks site caught fire again. Fire crews responded to that blaze at the vacant industrial site in Point Douglas after 4 yesterday afternoon. The site has suffered several significant fires since it was gutted by a massive blaze in July 2023. The city says it believes yesterday's fire started by accident while contractors were working on the roof. The workers were able to get out safely before firefighters arrived. In Halifax, wildlife rescue centers seeing an influx of sick pigeons who were apparently poisoned. Right now, Hope for Wildlife has 2 in intensive care. Hope Swinimer says they've likely ingested poison-laced corn kernels.
We do see a lot of places that may put out corn laced with a rodenticide or a poison, and that's what we hear the most of. And it makes us easy to diagnose because the bird will come in with a crop full of corn, and that usually is the first indicator that something's wrong.
The city of Halifax banned poisoning pigeons in 2015, but only on municipal properties. Swinimer says it's dangerous not only for the pigeons, but for other animals who might consume toxins. You can find the latest news updated throughout your day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Do you know what I forgot to mention all morning? I have forgotten to mention that the Niverville Nighthawks are going to the semifinals in the Centennial Cup. So how did that happen already? Because they've won 3 straight. And so that has given them a bye, and they're going straight into the semifinal, even though they still have another game today. So congrats to them. Super exciting for Niverville. And we continue to watch what's going on at the Centennial Cup. Flin Flon's been there as well. With a last look at what's going on in the weather forecast, Abby's back.
Yeah, we're going to enjoy more like a bright, sunny spring day with conditions warming in the south, while up north we're still seeing cooler temperatures, looking at just 7 degrees sunny intervals. Highs will be near 20 degrees, but the province is really going to enjoy lots of sunshine today. A widespread clearing with major major trend of warming up conditions in the southern end of the province. Winnipeg, it's sunny outside. It is clear. We're at 10 degrees right now. We're warming up to 23 later.
Lovely. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
All right, Corey, what you got?
A collision in Notre Dame and Sherbrooke. Emergency crews are on scene, but they're blocking all the southbound lanes on Sherbrooke and the northbound median lane. Westbound Notre Dame curb and middle lanes are blocked as well.
Chloe Friesen, Sophia Peralto Barone, as well as our I-team and Kristen Annabelle specifically, and Emily Enns. Also, Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez, Heather Wells, Joni Nicolo, and Megan Ketchison. That is everyone that worked in the program this morning. Our Studio 15 crew, though, is Abby Adiemi, Corey Funke, you just heard from, and Mr. Darren Marash. And I want to thank everybody for all their hard work here on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, Manitoba. We'll talk to you tomorrow.